Assalamu alaikum. Jazakallah khairan. Welcome back, everyone. We've been having some conversations, obviously, since the morning, and one of the things that I highlighted at the start was the impact of expectations on our experience of life. So the way I like to explain it is that there's our expectations of ourselves, of the people around us, of our life situation, and then there's reality, right? Now, the closer our reality pairs up with our expectations, the more content we are. So if we expect our children to wake up in the morning and greet us with Assalamu alaikum, and they do it, we are happy and content. If we expect our children to give us salam when they come in, but they come in and completely ignore us, now the gap between our expectation and reality is a gap of frustration. So basically, the bigger the gap between your reality and your expectation, the more frustration you have. So one of the challenges of today's society is how to understand and maintain realistic expectations. Okay, because we live in a world where everything is plus, it's oversized, okay, it is amplified. So one of the challenges for couples, whether they are discussing marriage or they're in a marriage, is to be very clear on what are my expectations and how realistic are they, in an honest and rational way. This applies for brothers and sisters. I'm sure there are sisters who can speak to the fact that some men's expectations are unrealistic. If you expect your wife to look the same as she did after no children versus 10, it's an unrealistic expectation because Allah didn't create us like that. Similarly, sisters, if you expect your husband who's an introvert to become the life of the party when it's a family gathering, it's an unrealistic expectation. It's not who he is. So managing our expectations is a tool that we can all learn and will change the dynamic of conversations when we are looking for marriage and when we're in marriages as well. And Allah knows best.
Since we have a few minutes, maybe you can have a few comments.
Truth be told, I really don't have much to add to that. I think that's just spot on. Yeah, spot on. MashaAllah.
The session will be a quick one.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think it's Brother Nasir still online. Maybe he can sort of chime in with something from a psychologist's perspective. If not, are there any questions from the audience? Any sort of feelings that you have? Any personal experiences that may have shaped your expectations? Brother.
Sorry, I had a question from earlier. Not necessarily about marriage, because obviously, you know, but I had an experience with a sister. So to give you a bit of background, I grew up with a sister. She was my neighbor, and we were kind of close. But slowly, as you grow older, obviously, you know, slowly part. Recently, about 2 years ago, we're now adults, and obviously the way Western culture is and the way what you see all the time, it's very easy to fall into, you know, wanting physical contact, and everybody understands, right? I had some problems myself, she had some problems herself, and I managed to rein in myself, and nothing happened, obviously, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Brother, sorry, can I just pause you for a second there, please, inshallah. Guys, this situation that the brother is sharing with us, and thank you for that, is such a real situation. It really is, alhamdulillah, that nothing happened. It's not obvious. It's not obvious. Because even people who have Islam, who understand, they know all the rules, shaitan will get the best of all of us. So if Allah has protected you, alhamdulillah, without disclaimer, inshallah.
Yeah, just to continue. So alhamdulillah, nothing happened. But she did, at that point, she asked me to marry her, right? I felt that the reason for that was not because she was ready to be a wife, or that I was ready to be a husband, a khalifa, but rather she just wanted to, like you said earlier, make that halal, right? So I rejected. Not that I didn't, she's still family to me because obviously I grew up with her, but I said, no, I'm not ready for that. I'm starting to university. I'm not ready to do the things that the Khalifa is supposed to do, provide, protect. I don't have that time. I'm not there yet. And recently, she slowly after that, she was very Islamic before, and she wore her hijab and everything, and like slowly she has left that. She doesn't wear her hijab anymore. She dresses,
So I tell you what, rather than describe her situation now, get now at this point to what the question could be, only because just in case people know you and will know her.
Right, yeah, okay, fine. Thank you. Right, so if that situation were to arise, where you've rejected a sister and she slowly left the deen, firstly, what would you say to the sister? And secondly, if the situation arises where the sister now moves away from wanting a Muslim to, seeing a non-Muslim and hoping that the non-Muslim will embrace Islam so that she can have a halal relationship with him, what would you say to sisters in that kind of situation? Because I've seen, like, not even just with my family or whatever, but with lots of sisters on the internet or in general, sisters that I've met at school, at university, they're very inclined onto getting into a relationship with a non-Muslim and then hoping that they'll slowly become Muslim, while they themselves slowly distance.
Very common phenomenon nowadays, especially over the last 5-10 years, definitely.
Jazakallah khairan. The first thing I would like to say is that those of us who are parents, we need to start talking openly and honestly with our children about marriage. In one of my YouTube sessions, we outlined a potential way to heal what's happening in our communities, and it starts with us healing ourselves firstly. It starts with us, men and women, getting grounded in the purpose of life, the purpose of marriage, what we need to bring to the table as a Muslim husband, as a Muslim wife, and healing anything that we may encounter there. Any trauma, any stuff from your childhood, any baggage, basically, that you hold individually that is getting in the way of you showing up, we need to start there. The next step is having conversations, open and honest conversations with our children about marriage. The good and the realistic of it. I'm not going to say the good and the bad, I'm just going to say the good and the realistic, okay? Because that is what it is, it's real. So having those conversations and encouraging our children to be marriage-minded, and it sounds so old-fashioned, it sounds so retrograde, right? But the point is, human beings, as the Shaykh said, are primed for contact, for community, for connection. And if our children do not yearn for connection in a marriage, they will yearn for a connection in a haram relationship. That is fact. If you don't talk to your children about physical things, it doesn't mean they're going to stop wanting it. Some parents had this idea that just don't talk about it. Hopefully they will never think about it until I bring it up again. That's not how it works. So, encouraging our children to develop the skills and attitudes that they'll need to be able to enjoy that intimate connection in a halal marriage. Parents, we need to do better. And then, when you get to that stage and you're having these conversations, we need to also as a community decide, are we ready to help these young people to become one in halal and support them through these marriages? Because if we think that the only people that deserve to be married are men who have got all their money, they've got their job, they've got their house, they've got everything sorted, the girl needs to have her degree and her masters, etc. What we're saying to the generation is that from the age of 13, which is, if they go to school here, that's when they start to become interested, if not earlier. From the age of 13 to 23, 25, 28, 29, 30, 35, we expect you to be completely celibate. Does anyone think that that is a realistic ask? Or do we, as parents and as a community, need to start having honest conversations saying, what is more important? That my son has all the things on the checklist before I allow him to marry, or that I support him in order to be able to do this, and we support the young couple emotionally, strategically, practically, to be able to build a life together. These are honest conversations. So with regards to your situation, it's a difficult one because we don't know how, obviously she's on her journey, and may Allah guide her in the best way. But when you said that you didn't want to do nikah because you were not ready to be a husband and she was not ready to be a wife, this goes back to my question. If you know that your son is not ready, you believe, should I say, he's not ready to be a husband, meaning to be a provider, to be qawwam, etc. What do you say to him? Sorry, son, all those feelings that you have, you just deal with that. Wait until you're older, wait until you're ready. Is that the solution? Or is the solution to have an honest conversation and say, okay, we're going to help you to do this, but it's going to mean X, Y, and Z. And the rest you'll learn along the way. Just a short story. A sister that a very close sister of mine, her son came to her, he said, I want to get married. He was 21. And you know, nowadays, 21, many women don't want to marry a 21-year-old, okay? Many girls wouldn't really consider that. But he had found someone, they both wanted to get married. And my friend said, he's not ready. I know him. His room is still a mess. You know, like he's not responsible. He doesn't know what he's doing. He can't be a husband. And in the end, they decided, okay, it's better that they have the nikah, they have, you know, they get married, keep it halal, than the opposite. So they got married. And let me tell you one thing, that boy shocked everyone. Because the very act of committing to this woman made him a man, made him grow up. He became a different person, and nobody could believe it. And a year later or whatever, people look back and they said, I would never have believed that he could be so considerate, so responsible, so organized. All of the things. Marriage makes us grow up. Commitment makes us grow up. So all of us parents out here saying, oh, my daughter's not ready, my daughter's not ready. Why is she not ready, bro? Like, why? She's 19, she's 22, she's 25, she's not ready. Why? Whose fault is that? Your son is not ready to get married, he's 26, 27? Why? That's what I mean about parents preparing the future husbands and wives, inshallah.
Just on that point, some of you will know when Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu was asked that, you know, who would you nominate if you weren't around? Because possibly Umar radiallahu anhu. So this wasn't, he hadn't passed it. Someone said to him that Umar's religiosity is a little bit kind of tough to handle, right? So it's all right for him, but we kind of find it difficult. Abu Bakr said, you know, if that time ever comes, the responsibility will soften you. Because responsibility does something to you, not all the time, but you know, responsibility can do something to people once they have it, in a way that it doesn't when they don't. Which is what the Ustad was making the point. As regards to specifically whether you should or shouldn't, or what you should, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that protect all of us and help us keep our boundaries and our adab with Allah, our adab with the Prophet, and our adab with each other, and especially with the opposite gender. We're not faulted for having desires that are just instinctive and natural, but we are responsible for the way that we manifest those desires and behave in the grip of those desires. We ask Allah to tell you.
Thank you, Shaykh. There was another question from a brother.
Yes, it wasn't actually a question. I just wanted to make two comments. Now, first comment was basically, obviously, women's nature is different from men's nature, so that relates to the fit. So many of the checklists that women may have, they relate to their hypergamy. That nature of wanting the best you can get. So in many of these marriage apps, for example, you have height, weight, etc. So instead of deen and character, so perhaps the apps themselves need to change. The other thing.
Would the apps need to change when the attitude that the app is trying to appeal to hasn't changed?
Well, if you don't have that fruit in front of you, then maybe out of sight, out of mind. So maybe the apps themselves are following what the secular culture is following, because that's what we want. So in a sense, you can't really fault women for wanting certain things, but you can direct them to what is Islamically the right criteria that you should be choosing. So for example, you could have, that was the thing about hyperbole. The other thing I mentioned, yes, so for example, at universities now there's a lot of pressure because obviously you have hormonal strength, etc. is very high in young people. So you have a mixed congregation. So some of the shuyukh I've heard, apparently the Maliki madhab, they have said that muta is now acceptable. So you get, it's not only the culture, it's some of our leaders themselves who are, because of the pressure that they are getting, trying to make something halal, they're going into somewhere else.
Is that muta, or are you referring to misyar? Because I think
No,
that
no.
was in muta, the one that's practiced.
Misyar is another issue, where there is differences of opinion as to whether it's halal, but muta clearly isn't halal. So,
and the simple reason for that is if such a scholar did say that, which would be quite unimaginable. The reason why is because there is an ijma, there is an established consensus about its illegality, about its prohibition, and something that has an ijma, a scholarly consensus behind it, can't be changed.
I mean, that's true from the legal point of view, but on the ground, that is...
Yeah, so it wouldn't be, so it wouldn't have the backing of a scholarly voice. If people did it, if we as Muslims did it to violate the law, then that would be violating the law, but it couldn't be legalised in any scholarly sense. Okay, because it doesn't fall within the ambit of legal or valid differences of opinion. It's an ijma, a consensus.
Yeah, so the first point was the fitra, the differences between men. So men are religious, for example. So for example, you have certain things that perhaps men do private in a computer. You know what I'm trying to say. So whereas women, they try to get everything all in one guy. So the hypergamous nature. So it's trying to redirect that in a sort of a...
Okay. I think we've got the gist of what you're saying. So,
that's basically...
Sister, if you'd like to, you wanted to come in.
Would you like to chime in? Wait.
You mentioned, Jazakallah khairan, brother, you mentioned the hypergamy, which is basically wanting to marry up, right? And yes, most women, like we said, in fact, the show of hands showed most women would prefer for their husband to provide and pay for all the bills, right? Sisters, we said that, didn't we? So this is something we all know. Men know this, women know this, for us. I think when we talk about expectations and the checklist, it's not those types of things. It's not things to do with provision or protection. It's the other things, right? It's the lifestyle things. It's the emotional things. It's the personal preference things that become set in stone because of imbibing love stories and romances and having just fantasies, basically. So I just wanted to make that clarification. But with this issue of people saying that because there's a mixed environment, we should open the door to halal hookups or halal, which is what it is really. This is a very short-sighted view. I will go on record as saying that. It is a very short-sighted solution to a very serious problem. And it's a solution that even if there is some kind of scholarly backing, causes more problems than it solves. The issue is that individuals, every one of us in here, needs to take responsibility for our own environment. That's the reality. We have innate desires, Allah's created us with those. But your innate desire doesn't make you go and do crazy stuff. That's to do with your environment, that's to do with the stimulus around you, that's to do with the influences, your peers, what you read, what you listen to, what you watch. All of that influences you to act on your desires. So every one of us needs to take responsibility as individuals to say, yes, Allah has given me certain desires, but He has also given me the ability to tame those desires by not only my own taqwa, but also by controlling my environment. And I think we all need to take responsibility for that. Because if we don't, and we go with the idea that, well, zina is there anyway, these kids are falling into it anyway, let's try and put a halal sticker on it and make it not as bad as it could be. The problem there is that now you've opened the door to serial halal hookups. And we know perfectly well that when it comes to women, to men, it's not desirable to have many partners. And we know this when it comes to women. This is damaging to your future relationships. It's damaging to the longevity of union. So if in university, if we get to a stage in the Muslim community where basically everyone knows that at university, sisters have nikahs, quote unquote nikahs, you know, and you don't know how many she had, 3, 4, 5, all the time she was at university. How do men think that that will impact the way they view those sisters when now they've graduated and they're like, okay, I'm ready to get married now, a proper marriage? Brothers, what do you think? Mums, what do you think? Are you happy for your daughter to do that?
She wasn't serious.
Right.
Can I jump in here?
Yes, Brother Nasir, please, Jazakallah khairan. Did you want to say
I'm
anything?
sorry. Sister Naima, when you finish?
Yeah.
I can't see
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah, no, go for it.
I don't think you can see us.
It's still an answer.
So a couple of things, and I mean this in all due respect. Just off the case of Muta, because it was brought up. For my imams, my scholars, advice to you, advice, as someone who works with sisters in various countries. And don't take this as, please don't take this as me advocating for it. But the line of it's a scholarly consensus doesn't work. Because you can find, and I know it to be a fact, and I've seen sisters, not just brothers, who find a Sunni scholar that says that it is valid. It's written, it's there. Is it the majority? Absolutely not. But I think the route that would be better is for us to take the time to go through why it is in the long term problematic. In the short term gratification. From a therapeutic lens, we always want to look for long term. We don't want to look for short term. What benefits us over the long term? Short term, you're going to always get the gratification you need. Hence, this is where addiction comes from. You have a demand that I have to feel a certain way right now. I have a demand that I have to let go of a certain emotion that is uncomfortable for me. So what can I do right now? Because I must not feel what I feel right now. What will give me that fix? That I can be a substance, or that can be going on a matrimonial act to get my quick hit of validation. So my suggestion to my scholars who will ever see this, for those present, you can say the line of there is consensus. I would suggest to you what is also on the ground is people that are doing the digging and finding Fulan, that is a scholar, that has a very minority opinion that says it is permissible. So it's better for us to have something in place to counter that with logic. Just a suggestion. Because I've seen it.
Can I just come back on that? You're at, sorry. Could I just come back on that first point so there would be a continuity? Whilst you're absolutely right, Sister Naima's right, we need long-term solutions. We don't know each other, so it might, and I don't want to blow my own trumpet, well, we're talking about 30 years in Dawah, just say in the UK. I don't think there were many people 30 years ago, along with me, who were speaking about macro thinking and not micro thinking, long-term visions, not short-term visions. Maybe it needs to be beyond fit. I thank my teachers for kind of like drilling that into me. But the scholarly spiritual voice has a slight more responsibility than du'at, speakers, people in the social sciences and so on and so forth, which is, on the one hand, there is keeping the law in order, and on the other hand, knowing that the law is a means, okay, it's a path, but the path also involves the inward law as well, and it's the inward law that really, the law of the heart, that really is going to matter. So it's not something that not only is I'm not oblivious to, but it's something that for perhaps close to 40 years now, 4 decades, Allah's given me the tawfiq to focus on that. But I didn't want to leave the audience here with any misconception about the ijma, even though the consensus, even though there is 1 or 2 scholars whose voice seems to have gone against the ijma, but the scholars ago, almost 800 years ago, sorted out those rare scholarly voices within the tradition and where it fits. And that's something that you will only know if you study. Otherwise, absolutely, we need long-term goals. We need to move away from the culture of fatwa, which is not saying we don't need fatwas, we need fatwas, but move away from the culture of fatwas to the culture of the inward law and beginning to psycho-spiritually grow and mature from there. Otherwise, just a fatwa culture tends to keep us, I need to say this respectfully, it tends to keep us childish. It doesn't really allow us to grow in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to grow. And there is an advantage of all the disadvantages of not having Islamic environments, okay, and the law to help us along. And there is a lot of difficulties because of that. But the goodness is it allows us to grow our God consciousness within ourselves, not from outside of ourselves. And if we can take that path, bi'idhnillah, there's great benefit. Otherwise, the 2 speakers focusing on long-term strategies, developing inward mindset, which Brother Nasir mentioned that before the break, those are all really key to the issue. Marriage, just one last point. Most people might see marriage as something external, but actually, if we look at the kind of traditional values that would make a good marriage, gentleness, understanding, compatibility, patience, gratitude, appreciation of one another, and so on and so forth. All those virtues, some of our spiritual masters say, are actual spiritual qualities of the heart before they are actions of the limbs. And so actually, the question that a prospective spouse, a young man needs to be asking a young woman, or a woman needs to be asking a man is, what's your spiritual ambition? Right, before your kind of financial background, before your academic qualifications, and all those other personal idiosyncrasies, we might need to be asking, well, what's your spiritual vision? So maybe we can sing from the same hymn sheet. Who knows?
Can I jump in?
I think Brother Nasir just wanted to say another comment. Do you want to finish your second comment?
Yeah, if I could just finish that point. So I may have missed the context of this, so I could be wrong, but from what I heard, it sounded as though we were taking accountability away from sisters in terms of the apps, that the apps need to change. And for me, from a counseling standpoint, coaching standpoint, that's problematic. No, the accountability is on whoever goes on the app. You need to go on that app in the right space mentally and emotionally. And if not, you need to have the skill sets needed to de-escalate your thinking before you go on that app. So let's not create a reality where we escape accountability on the brother or the sister. If you know you're in a low space and you need a hit of validation, then you need to have the tools and the skill set, i.e. come to the workshop tomorrow, so you can get the skill set. So you won't find yourself on an app trying to get a hit of validation of self-love because you didn't get it from your father or your mother. And you're 26 years old, searching for it on an app. Learn the skills that you need so you know how to de-escalate that intense emotion of feeling alone. Because loneliness will lead you, when you don't know how to handle loneliness, it'll lead you chasing love, having a desire for love, and you'll be looking for it on an app. Quick example, very quick, I'll keep it under a minute. I had a sister I was working with the other day. Pardon me, I'll be very frank. 26 and a virgin. Willing to accept a brother. 26 virgin Nikah. Willing to marry a brother who was 27. and making 20,000. Now, we can say deen-wise, this is fine. I would say from a logic standpoint, since you're missing the target in terms of expectations and standards, and understanding your leverage within the Muslim marriage market. And I think until we have those type of conversations, that's the honest conversation I was alluding to before we had the break. Sisters lie to one another with good intentions, but you lie to one another. So my suggestion to you is have a support system set up for yourself when you're getting married. Yes, have your girlfriends, but make sure you have amongst that support system somebody that's going to tell you, sis, you think you're an 8, but you're a 6. If you don't have girlfriends that can tell you that, you need to make sure you get a cultural concept in that support system. Because your expectations of what you think you can get is not there for the market. And you're going to find yourself 31 searching still. Pardon if I was a little emotional.
No, it's fine. It's good to. Real talk is always useful.
So I'll just say this. Some of you watching will get that plug. That was a plug. That was a quote from Sean Carter. Pardon my passion.
Okay. Well, that's the time when the brothers are like, yes! And the sisters are like, oh God, really? Did we really go there with this conversation? This segment was about coupling or decoupling, deal or no deal. And really the main thing that I wanted us to leave this space with is the understanding that a marriage is not there to serve you as an individual. A marriage requires of you, right? The marriage requires of you. So if you are not ready to give, if you are not ready to invest, if you're not ready to pour in, if you're not ready to prioritize the marriage over yourself and your needs and your desires and your everything, at least some of the time, you are not ready to be married. Now, are you looking for love? And are you ready to love someone in the way that you see people talking about love? You probably are. You're probably ready for the dates and the gifts and the little love notes, right? And the little names that you call each other, because society teaches us loads about relationships and hardly anything about marriage. So many sisters, I know, and I'm going to speak about sisters, women, not sisters' issues, a women's issue. Because when we go on social media, usually the accounts that we follow, the stuff that we watch, we're all relationship experts. Put your hands up, sisters, if you know what I'm talking about. Aren't we all relationship experts? Can't we spot the red flags? We know what red flags are. Don't we? We know what a narcissist is, how to spot a narcissist, you know, what it means to do this, what it means to do that. All of these relationship things that we imbibe, we're always hearing and reading and talking about relationships. But that field of study has almost nothing to do with marriage. Because marriage is bigger than just you and your feelings and where you're at. It's bigger than how you feel. Anyone, as I said at the beginning, who's been married for over 15 years in this room, put your hand up. Anyone married for over 15 years? I won't ask you to put your hands up, but I know for a fact there's been ups and downs, right? There's been times when you wanted to leave, or you wanted to send her home, or you wanted to get him out of there. You've had those times. You've had times when you've cried. You've had times when you've lost your temper, when you've gone home and you said, I can't do this anymore. And the reason that you're still married 15, 20, 25 years later is I hope that you understand that marriage is bigger than you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will choose, inshallah, a spouse for each one of you, maybe several. That spouse is amana. Again, going back to the internal law, the only thing that will save us, Muslims, is when we truly believe and act as Muslims. We submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what He decides for us. We don't get to choose the tests. We don't even get to choose our partners. Because subhanAllah, how many of you have wanted to marry a particular person? You chose them, But qadr Allah, it didn't work out. Some of you married somebody and you thought that was your forever. Allah took them away. Even that you do not have control over. The only thing you have control over is yourself. How you choose to behave, how you choose to view things, how you choose to show up. And so this issue of coupling and decoupling and deal or no deal, a lot of the conversations about marriage today, guys, are so dunyawi, it's disgusting. Because we were talking, and because this has come out now, I used to have a big issue with how Kevin Samuels talked about high-value men, right? Anyone know who I'm talking about? Yes. Right? So he used to talk about a high-value man and how because of hypergamy, all women want a high-value man. And he had a definition of high-value men. And I used to watch his show and I used to see the women come on there saying, I need someone who's this, I need someone who's that, 6 foot, 6 figures, 6, da-da-da. So many things, the checklist. My issue, as somebody who was, alhamdulillah, married to my husband for 17 years before he returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah yarhamu, and who counts in her circle, is blessed to count in her circle several Muslim marriages of 30 years plus. Some of them polygynous, some of them not. I can tell you categorically, and I'm sure that I will get the yes of everyone here, although money can be an issue, a man being rich does not guarantee a good marriage. A man having status does not guarantee you a good marriage. So all of these things that society is telling us to focus on, dunyawi things, superficial things, surface things, nothing to do with character, nothing to do with the person's heart, nothing to do with their connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we think, oh, that doesn't make a difference. As long as he provides me, it's fine. As long as he can give me the lifestyle that I dream of, as long as she is an 8 or a 9 or a 10, and all of these stupid things. As Muslims, we have the tools to be smarter than that. So, with the couples, and the decoupling, and the uncoupling, please remember the amana. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put you two together for a reason. That reason could be your own growth, it could be your children, it could be this network that you've built amongst yourselves. It is worth investing in, even through the hardship. Because if you, as a man or a woman, because the thing is, we seem to think, and I know this from my time in the community, we think women have the monopoly on suffering in this world, especially Muslim women. In the community, especially amongst sisters, we believe sisters suffer more than brothers. We see our suffering, we speak our suffering, we hear each other because we talk to each other, right? So sisters know what other sisters are going through. But I will say this, no one is exempt. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not play like that. There is no one gender that gets to suffer while the other one gets everything their way. It doesn't work like that. So there is unhappiness amongst wives, and there is unhappiness amongst husbands. There are women who are oppressed, and there are men who are oppressed. There are ungrateful women, and there are ungrateful men. The question is, which one are you? And can you discipline yourself to not be of those, so that you can truly show up for this amana? Because if you have someone in your life right now, husband, wives, whatever it is, and you're taking that situation for granted, understand this, that amana is a loan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can take it back anytime He likes. It has happened before, it can happen to you. So don't make the mistake of looking at your husband or your wife through the lens of how bad they are, what they haven't done, how they've missed the mark. Because that makes you believe that your marriage is not worth working for, that this person is not worth honoring, this person is not worth working with. And shaitan will fool you with that. So be careful, because shaitan wants us all alone and scarred. Because when you're lonely and alone and scarred, that is when you fall into the haram. That's when you fall into the sins. That's when you fall into despair. So we as Muslims need to be smarter than that.
Jazakallah khairan for sharing your insights, and to all the speakers for sharing their valuable insights on the subject of expectations within marriage. We're going to have a short break for us, it's Asr time in the UK, and then we'll resume at 3:10 UK time, inshallah. There'll be a presentation on how to survive, or will Muslims survive the marriage crisis And then after that, we'll round up with a general session for all the speakers to conclude their final remarks, inshallah.
Oh, we're just going to give you a bump for us now. I know it was meant to be done 5 minutes ago. Inshallah, we'll let it go on a bit.
I think a lot of things that were discussed I can cover, but in a different way. Yes. But no, it's really good to hear all this discussion.
أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح قد قامت الصلاة قد قامت الصلاة الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله.
Straight in the line, please. Allahu Akbar. Allahu Akbar. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. سمع الله لمن حمده. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. الله أكبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
Assalamu alaikum. The brothers and sisters, inshallah, we'll be starting the discussion on 5+3, inshallah. So although we said 10+3, but we'll start 5+3, inshallah. Jazakallah khair.
Well, no, I think when he has a gap.
I think that's what lunchtime is for.
Oh, the one in the middle. So I wasn't following online. The one
Later on, we
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brothers and sisters, we're going to be resuming now because obviously with the short day, the Salah time's going very quickly, so we're going to have Maghrib in just under an hour, so we need to really start this session.
Because there's now this brother speaking, and they're speaking for like bare long, so sisters can't hear. So
Brothers and sisters, okay.
a lot, but there's some research on polygamous marriages, because again, from a multicultural context, the legal professionals, the socio-legal professionals are interested in the implications of polygamous marriages. And then there's also research that is has been conducted on the role of Sharia councils. And again, some of it is, you'll hear the sensationalist headlines in the newspapers about those as well. There are other kinds of research that are done with marriage as well, and again, this is where it becomes quite depressing, because if you do a Google search just on marriage, on Muslim marriages, and even if I do a search in academic databases and I just type in Muslim marriages, the vast majority of the terms that come up are going to be around domestic violence, forced marriages, honour-based violence, killings, female genital mutilation. This is how the academic text is also framed. So this is what I mean when I'm talking about problematizing of Muslim marriages. So when I've been talking about the British Muslim marriage crisis, it's stemming from research that I did earlier on Muslim women in higher education, and then following through and then seeing where they've developed after they've been to university. And one of the kind of key aims and motivating factors that women spoke about when wanting to go to university is to go to university, we will get a good quality husband. And this is what lots of parents would drum into their daughters as well. You go to university, you get a good quality husband, you have a good income, you'll have a nice life together. But that reality hasn't happened, and there are lots of women now who are in their 30s, 40s and even in their 50s who are finding it difficult to marry and may never marry. And we may all have different kind of views on why that is the case, but I would suggest that it's very multifaceted. There is no one reason why we are finding that there are more women in their older ages who have not married. And there's similar issues also for men as well. So I know that men's experiences have been discussed as well today, and I see a lot of sadness amongst Muslim men as well, who are kind of also aging and not finding somebody and becoming very depressed by this. We know that also in terms of a crisis, our Muslim marriages are breaking down almost at the same level as the white British population, so that's at 42%. According to the most recent census data. There should be some more coming up very soon, which will give us a more accurate picture. But we know that our marriages, when we can chart them, they're breaking down at a very similar rate. And we know that marriages are also breaking down in the early years of marriage. So early marriage divorces are becoming increasingly frequent. And there are some appalling examples that I know that many of you in the room and my brothers and sisters on the panel here will have had lots of experience of dealing with some very appalling cases of physical and emotional abuse. As I mentioned, the fact that marriages aren't registered means that those marriages which people have been describing earlier as temporary marriages are also under the radar. So we don't really know how often this happens. We can just rely on anecdotal data and anecdotal evidence, but that's all we have at the moment. So that is where we're kind of, in terms of context, where we are in terms of research and what we can work with in terms of research. I do a lot of my research, I don't look at statistics, I look at qualitative experiences, so I spend a lot of my time interviewing people. But we know, again, that the Muslim issue around partner searching is a global issue. We know that it has, obviously, it's a global issue for women across the board, but we know that with Muslims we have a significance to it because of the value we attach to marriage and the value we attach to family life and strong, stable backgrounds. And what we've been seeing in recent years is this change in discourses. Again, this is in the academic literature, from arranged marriage to something that is an Islamic or a halal relationship. And, again, what does that even mean? When I've spoken to lots of women, they've been talking to me about the way that they would be looking for a third way, something that's a bit in the middle. They want to have love, but they want to have a halal relationship as well. So again, how do people navigate that? What does that kind of mean in real terms for people? And obviously we've been speaking about the apps, and we are now in an app generation. And so there's been a rapid, over the past 10, 15 years, there's been a rapid proliferation of online opportunities. And that in itself creates certain issues, which again has been spoken about, and I will talk a little bit about that as well. We talk about things in terms also as a Muslim spinster crisis. This was a phrase that was coined in 2012 by Salman Muhammad in an article for The Guardian. And I've seen this again in the research that I do, where women have spoken about the fact that they feel that they have priced themselves outside of the Muslim marriage market by being too educated. So and also by reaching a certain age. So sometimes women have jokingly described themselves as a Muslim Bridget Jones, but they do kind of talk about themselves as being too old or too educated, and that is a reason why they're not meeting the right people or not getting proposals. There's also been discussion in some of the academic literature on this notion of the myth of the happy celibate, where there's an article, it was again 2009, and it was talking about the position and the kind of prospects of older unmarried Muslim women who are trapped between what's described as these negatively positioned choices, either sex outside marriage on the one hand, or celibacy on the other. And again, just kind of querying what the positions of women are. How do they navigate these positions of being single, being the auntie, and not having that marriage that was promised to them and that they expected, and how they have to kind of maybe maintain an impression of being happy with being single. So for me, as a researcher, a couple of the key research questions that I am looking at is, despite the fact that we have a proliferation of different avenues now for people to marry and find people, we have so many different matrimonial events, we have all these websites, we have so many apps. Why is it so difficult for Muslims to still find partners, especially British-born Muslims in this context? And what are British Muslim men's and women's experiences of searching for matrimonial partners? What's it like on the ground? And I want to, before I go into that, just kind of preface with some observations. And one of the things that I'm looking around and I'm seeing, and I'm very happy to see, is that there are parents here. Because very often when I've done this kind of talk, there's hardly been any parents. Parents also very rarely attend Muslim marriage events. And I think parents really need to be part of this debate, as you've been saying as well, because it's not just about instilling certain values and virtues in your children, but it's also about hearing the realities on the ground. Because a lot of what drives some of the anxiety around people that I speak to is the fact that their parents don't understand what they're going through. Their parents don't understand that it's actually really hard to find somebody. And parents are also, in many ways, they've devolved responsibility to their children. So in many ways, Mizan has said this in conversations that I've had with him, in that, the laptop is effectively the go-between, is effectively taking the role of the parent in the navigation of relationships. So, we live our lives in segregated ways, and then all of a sudden we're expected to then go and find a partner and be able to engage with a conversation with someone and know what to look for in a partner. And we don't know that. We haven't got those skills. And because our parents aren't involved and our parents feel helpless because they don't have the networks anymore that they could have relied on in terms of the old arranged marriage system, they also feel that because their children are educated, their children are in a better place to know what they want and they can't help them, which I think is a fallacy and something that we perhaps need to really challenge. But parents really need to change their expectations and need to accept that their children may find partners that will not be on their checklists. So checklists are something that come up time and time again, and I'll be saying something about that in a moment as well. And it's also really good to see that there are some of our religious imams and imama and ulema who are here and who are active, but we need more involvement on the ground, because very often, again, young people are hearing the religious factors, they're hearing the religious expectations and criteria, but they're not having those discussions alongside social realities. And a lot of our religious imams and clergy, people who are, I use clergy in the wrong way, I apologise, but a lot of our religious leaders are not always fully aware of, again, the pressures that are facing people when they're searching for a partner and just the difficulties that they're experiencing. When people go to an event, there's going to be an event where there'll be about 500 people, a free event. It's overwhelming. It's overwhelming. People can't expect to find a partner so easily when they are just overwhelmed with so many people in one room and people can't hear each other. The experiences are also quite demoralising. But one of the things I've also kind of noted over the years is that Muslim men and women seem to be at loggerheads when approaching marriage. So all the criticisms that women have about men are very similar to the criticisms that men have about women. So women will be talking about men being very picky, very choosy, and discriminating against them on the basis of certain criteria. Men will have the same conversations. Both men and women are walking away from marriage events feeling demoralised, feeling unseen, feeling depressed, feeling helpless and hopeless. And so again, we have to kind of really question ourselves. When we are blessed with the faith that we have, why are we in this situation? I have to also ask another question and think about the fact that our parents somehow managed to get married. Again, we know that our parents, lots of them would have been arranged marriages, but if we put our parents in today's environment, how many think that our parents would actually have got married if they had to face the environment that we are living through now? How many parents would actually, secure a husband or a wife? And I think we need to kind of ask those questions and think, why is it they managed? We know, I mentioned arranged marriages, but they somehow they manage, and our parents come in all shapes and sizes. Some are good looking, some are not so good looking, but mashallah, they're all beautiful. But, they have the same kinds of physicalities that we all live with, and yet they married, and we are the ones, this generation is the one that is suffering or that is experiencing real great difficulty in getting married. So in terms of my methodology, I don't collect statistics, I'm not a data person, I'm rubbish with numbers, but also, as I mentioned, I heard the groan. Yeah. As I mentioned, it's very difficult to actually compile the statistics because marriages are not registered. Not all marriages are registered. There are some people who say that the vast majority of Muslim marriages are not actually registered, so we can't count how many people are married and how many people are divorcing. So a few years ago there was a Channel 4 survey. They did a survey of 1,000 women, and they found that the vast majority of those women who were married were not actually in a civil marriage as well. They had not registered their marriage, and a lot of them didn't know that they needed to register their marriage, or that they should even. So the kind of statistics is again just going to be very superficial. It's only going to be based on ethnicity, not on religion. And we'll be getting new census data coming up soon. So I've been doing this work for over 15 years, going to marriage events, paid and free events, looking at online databases, and also looking at the emergence of marriage apps. I've been doing lots of detailed interviews with Muslim men and with women, as well as lots of interviews that are informal of people who attend events as well. I've been doing interviews with women communities organisations and matrimonial event organisers, as well as also exploring some social media platforms. And Sister Naima, the kind of work that you do, the platforms and discussions that you have, I'm so happy to see, because they really do kind of open up a lot of discussions that have not been had in previous years, I think. I think all of this is relatively new in terms of speaking. So one of the things that we can see in terms of talking about the marriage apps is the use of the app is in many ways exemplifying the problems that were already there in terms of finding a matrimonial partner. So some people may see them as extending the networks of a romantic possibility or marriage prospects, but they could also be adding to complications and stress. The impact of Instagram and Facebook and other kinds of social media platforms have raised expectations unrealistically. So they presented lots of times images of perfect Muslim couples and these unrealistic expectations of beautiful couples looking very happy, living happily ever after romanticized lifestyles. And we know that that is not the case. And we know that it's setting people up for failure. It's setting people up for disappointment. There's an interesting piece of work, or several pieces of work by a sociologist called Sherry Turkle, and she wrote a very famous book called Alone Together, Why We Expect More from Technology and Less from Each Other. And she says, these days, insecure about our relationships and anxious about intimacy, we look to technology for ways to be in relationships and protect ourselves from them at the same time. We fear the risks and disappointments of relationships with our fellow human beings. We expect more from technology and less from each other. And what she's effectively talking about is the fact that we now communicate, a large part of our communication is through our phones, through our apps. It's not about, whereas in the old days we'd pick up a phone call and have a conversation with someone. Now we will WhatsApp them, and we have our conversations via WhatsApp or via other forms of social media. We're less inclined to meet up with people. And that's partly because our lives have become so much busier. But technology has infiltrated our lives in a way that is taking away our social skills and also our ability to be able to have face-to-face conversations with each other. So she's talking about that. And then she says, we're designing technologies that give us the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship, which I think is really profound. And I've only kind of got 5 minutes left and I have a lot more to say. But I want to sort of pretty much say that the impact of social media-led user practices has led to what I see a lot of this notion of self-branding and a commodification of the self in marriage sites. So people present what they want you to see. People don't always reveal their true selves. They don't do that in real life anyway, but on social media platforms, we get a lot of the filters, we get lots of people presenting an image of what they think other people would like to see in order to secure some hits or some likes. And what we're also seeing is the commercialization of marriage, the increase in marriage websites is good business. There is, do any search. There are so many different ways of finding a matrimonial partner now online. And what happens is that increased choice leads to increased confusion. It leads to an inability to decide and a superficiality. It leads to what people have been talking about already, this sort of checklist mentality. And the superficiality of looking for a partner becomes something that is based on set criteria, which are not about people's values, it's about whether they tick certain boxes. What I've also noticed is that increased professionalization of people, of us, leads to an increased notion of individualization. And we are in a society now where we are talking about the individualized notion of the self. So the individual, what you can take from something is becoming more important as opposed to what you can bring and what you can give. And this is something that is being replicated in relationships where people talk more about the I as opposed to the we. And again, I want to just cite a couple of sociologists who discussed this notion of individualization when describing relationships and family and social structures in Western societies. And I would argue that we are seeing a lot of that I focus in Muslim relationships, or in the kind of development and in the kind of creation of Muslim relationships that I'm seeing right now. And the rise of internet dating, again for want of a better word, and the searching via these technological innovations is creating these kinds of notions of what I call a commodified game. So people are kind of basically presenting certain notions of themselves and playing off those, and that is what people are engaging with. People are not engaging with their real selves. And so what we are seeing is a digital transformation of intimacy. Alongside all of that, we are kind of also having to work with these gendered realities and tensions. And at the beginning I talked about how men and women are often at loggerheads. They are critical of each other for the same reasons. And I had a conversation many years ago with Gayasuddin Siddiqui, and he said men, from his experience of having to deal with lots of marriage breakdowns, he said that men can be professional in the workplace, but when they come home they adopt a village mentality towards their wives. And I've had women talk to me when they talked about their marriage breakdowns about how it started and kind of the things that led to it. And there'd be things like, for instance, they both work, the husband comes home earlier than the wife, and he sits there watching TV, waiting for the wife to come home to start the dinner. And those are the things, it's a small thing, but these are things that lead to tensions. And these are things that lead a lot of Muslim women who are very, very aware of their Islamic rights in a relationship and will often cite the Prophet, peace be upon him, his practices in the relationship he dealt with his wives, and the fact that he was very much a husband who was very hands-on in housework and chores, and lament at the fact that their husbands expect them to be their mothers. And that is the kind of the start of lots of tensions and problems. There's also another kind of differing perspective, which a woman said to me at an event, and she was looking around the room and not very pleased with what she saw. And she said that men are looking for wives and women are looking for companions. And this again might highlight, I thought it was interesting because I think it highlights a qualitative difference between how women search and how men search. And to sort of just to say something very quickly about that, when we're talking about women's experiences, very often one of the reasons why they feel that they are not getting any proposals is that men are seeing them as too educated. And there's also a tendency for men to kind of seek women who are at least 4 to 5 years younger, and in some cases 10 to 15 years younger. I've spoken to men who will not speak to a woman who is past 30, even if they are 35 or 36. Some men will come to events who are in their 50s and again are looking for wives in their 30s, or younger if they can get that. Also, women tend to feel that men are not looking for women who are so academically or professionally accomplished. There's a real problem around female doctors. and finding matrimonial partners, which again, the irony here is that so many parents want their daughters to become doctors, but then when they do become doctors, they don't end up becoming, from mother-in-law's perspective, good daughter-in-laws, because their work hours are going to take them away from the home for a lot of the time. The other option that men have that women are less inclined to want to choose is that men are more willing to marry someone from their parents' country of origin. So they will go to a few marriage events, realise that they can't find anyone suitable there, and they know that their mum can sort them out with someone from back home. So that means that for them, that they go off and they get sorted out, but that's one less husband for someone here. Men also have the religious right to be able to marry someone from within the books. They can marry Christian and Jewish women, which is not something that Muslim women can do. But also, there is less social sanctioning on men who marry outside of the ethnic communities as well. And again, there's a lot of emphasis that is being placed on appearance. So at every marriage event that I've been to, there have always been the Miss Populars and the Mr. Populars, the ones who are the kind of the good-looking ones, the ones who attract all the attention, and the ones, so the George Clooney types and the kind of Julia Roberts types, so they are the ones who will get attention. Not everyone is born to be a model or a film star. And again, the apps, I think, are setting up unrealistic expectations of what people can gain or what people should be looking for in partners. Just a quick quote. Someone said to me, the negative is when the girl is educated and she continues further education, she gets older and older, and it's in our community, the more older you get, the more negatives they are. They say, like, she's still not married. And then a conversation with a man, he said, women need to wake up. I think girls in the UK need to wake up. They've gone over 30 and still dreaming, waiting for Mr. Perfect. I'm good looking, AAT qualified, house owner, British citizen, 36 and divorced, no kids, mum and dad lives with me. A lot of girls reject me for one of these reasons without even seeing me. They are looking for specs like buying a mobile. I'm going to Pakistan, inshallah, to get married because girls here are not serious about marriage. They need to be shown the reality. This will increase zina in Muslim girls and also lesbianism. I've seen a few Muslim girls going towards that if we don't do anything soon, because this is a basic instinct of all humans. Everyone, well, all right. Well, I've also had men who talk about women's, men who have medical backgrounds who talked about women past the age of 25 as not being ideal because they lose their fertility past 25 because their hips start to stiffen, and and so that's why he, even though he was in his 40s, would ideally be looking for a woman under 25. So these are the conversations that I've been having with people. So again, as I said, there's these setting up these unrealistic expectations for both men and women. We are expecting higher degrees of compatibility than is kind of realistic. And again, if we look at the non-Muslim community, how is it non-Muslims are able to have relationships and marry and take on other people's children when we can't do that? We have real kind of issues around being able to accept people with history. And again, I think we need to question why we do that and what we are doing to each other in that process. There's a lot of shyness, especially for Muslim men, surprisingly, but shyness is always seen as a sign of negativity and a sign of weakness and a lack of social skills. But again, there's this notion of being able to look for perfection and not acknowledging that people have flaws. There's also difficulties around coping with rejection and failed relationships. So again, because we are invested so much in marriage, when we think we met someone, we think that's the one, and then when it doesn't work out, we are very emotionally unequipped to deal with that breakdown and with that kind of relationship not working out. And this is where sometimes people are also turning to non-Muslims for marriage. There's rising levels of discontentment, anxiety and depression amongst both Muslim men and women who feel rejected and unmarriageable. This is leading to issues around mental health and body image issues. And if we kind of look at the checklist of sessions, we can see that some of the things that people put down as their kind of lists of things that they want is ethnicity. Although ironically, the issue around ethnicity and wanting to marry someone from my, parental background, so my parents can talk to them in their mother tongue, doesn't seem to apply to white converts. So white Western converts seem to be the ultimate goal or kind of prize. And this is really, for women, the age doesn't even matter. So again, I've seen events where women, converts come and mashallah, they have got children from a previous marriage, they are a bit older, and yet all the men will flock to her like bees to honey, and they will be ignoring all the other women in the room. So again, we need to kind of get past these colonial mindsets that we have about valorizing white Western converts as the ideal partner, and women do the same. They're all looking for their kind of Hamza Yusuf type character who's a convert, and the men are all looking for Jemima Khan. So we know there are real kind of issues there. I've spoken about appearances and age. Obviously religious sect is quite significant and important, but that's an issue that people are always talking about. And there's another issue which again we need to really work on as a community and think about, and that's issues around genetic issues or impairments. So if someone is hearing impaired or visually impaired, or someone has another kind of genetic impairment, or a kind of mobility impaired in a wheelchair, why is it we are not willing to think about those as potential partners? And again, if we look to the non-Muslim community, there is no such issue there. They manage to kind of get past those issues, but we don't. We kind of place a lot of emphasis on physical perfection in some shape or form. And then there's also these notions of ideal types, even when we're looking at people who are coming to divorced and widowed events. So divorcees and widowers, etc., they will only want to marry someone who, for instance, doesn't have children, or if there's children, the father isn't involved, even though if they have children, they will want to be involved in their children's relationships and their children's lives, but they won't tolerate a wife with an ex-husband who's around and looking after or paying maintenance for his children. So it kind of a bit of a hypocritical kind of attitude in that regard. But there's also this other thing that people talk about, and they always talk about the fact they want this click. They say, well, there wasn't a click there wasn't this instant attraction. And I would say a lot of that is because we have these romanticized notions of relationships, these kind of Hollywoodized, Bollywoodized, Lollywoodized, Nollywoodized relationships, and these notions that suddenly you meet someone across the room, your eyes meet, and all the kind of music happens and everything, and everyone starts dancing. That doesn't happen. People kind of don't want to give people a chance when they meet them as well. And one of the things that this superficiality, that the kind of increased commercialization of marriage has led to, is a change in attitude. And the fact that people know that there is so much choice out there has led to people with this attitude of there is someone better around the corner. Even though this person I'm speaking to is maybe 70% compatible with me, which should be okay, you can get on with that. But they will think, oh, maybe there's someone who's even more compatible, and I should carry on looking. And an attitude, again, of plenty more fish in the sea. This kind of leads to an exceptionalism, people not wanting to budge on their criteria. I'm going to finish in a moment before I get booted off the stage. But again, as I mentioned, people aren't willing to kind of really budge on their criteria. They're not willing to kind of move past issues around other people's previous histories and baggage. And this kind of fear of rejection, these kind of checklist mentalities are leading to these negative outcomes for men and women. They're leading to a fear of rejection. We know of people who hide behind online services to avoid going to meetings, and then they don't turn up to meetings, and instead they develop unhealthy relationships and attachments to people online without ever meeting them. And again, that is deeply, deeply problematic. It's also deeply problematic that people don't always disclose their true selves. So there's issues around sleazy behaviour online, people not being truly open about their histories and not giving full disclosure. There's issues around what women call the players, i.e. men with lots of female friends, and histories of kind of having lots of women that they would be speaking to for marriage, but then they're actually following through. There's also kind of odd behaviours at events as well, where people will scan a room and decide that there isn't anyone good looking enough for them and walk out. When men and women do this. And so that is also kind of a deeply problematic kind of symptom of this notion of choice. And rudeness to marriage organisers. So you talk to Ms. Anne, talk to anyone who's organised marriage events, there are people who can be very, very rude in terms of physical abuse and swearing and things like that. And lots of people kind of just very quickly will experience these marriage events as humiliating. They will talk about these marriage events as like a cattle market, as unnatural, poor matching compatibility between men and women, more women than men turning up, women who are much older than men, and men not willing to kind of look at women who are older than them. And again, just look at the non-Muslim community. They go past some of these issues. Look at Harry and Meghan. That's a classic example. She's older than him. She's divorced. So we don't have to look far. Again, just to kind of say that we are looking at another kind of consequence, another thing that's been happening in recent years is the number of online coaches, matrimonial coaches, aimed at trying to coach Muslims towards finding matrimonial partners. Now this is kind of a good business model because they can charge a lot of money for this, but we need to also question, do they work? To what extent do they help single Muslims to readjust and find their expectations? And a lot of these are based on kind of, again, UK and US based online coaching, dating coaching, things like that. And again, as I mentioned, there is an increased kind of need to talk about relationships, and platforms such as Sister Naima's do a great job in opening up these discussions. But there's also discussions, and these are lots of them that are focused on marriage, but there also needs to be discussions around people who are not married. There are some consequences that we need to kind of be open about, and we need to talk about, and women talk to me about these things. Potential consequences of celibacy and unfulfilled sexual needs, especially for those who are older, in terms of mental health needs, repressed sexual desires, and social stigma, and feeling socially inadequate, undesirable, unlovable. How do we deal with the cohort of people who will remain single? We can kind of be hopeful. But I kind of see on the ground that I'm speaking to women who are in their 50s and who are not married, or who had very short marriages and they've never married again, or who have never married. And so there needs to be a discussion around how we navigate remaining single and being alone, and being single and then having to care for elderly parents, and living with married siblings, thinking about how we engage with the notions of adoption and fostering, surrogacy, egg freezing, artificial insemination. These are all discussions that are being had at the moment in various different spheres within a Muslim context, and things that we need to also kind of start engaging with. I won't say any more about some of the others because you've spoken about things like temporary marriages and polygamy, and marrying outside religious and cultural boundaries. But I want to say, just kind of very quickly to end, and I'm very sorry I've overrun terribly, but what people have said to me is what they want is a request back to a personalised service. They want to move back to the matchmaker role. They want someone who knows them to help them find someone who knows someone else. They want that personalised service, and some are willing to pay high premiums for it. And they want mosques and Muslim organisations to do more to help young Muslims get married and offer better support. And there's a greater need. Lots of people are talking to me about premarital counselling for couples and more marriage support after marriage as well. Again, community-based and specialised and mainstream. There are not enough counselling services within the mainstream to be able to account for the numbers of Muslim relationships that need help. So those are kind of some of the things that people need to kind of be working on. And I just want to sort of say, just concluding thoughts, singledom is a reality and will remain a reality for significant numbers of Muslim men and women. We need to kind of think about this in terms of future forward planning, which is something that was being mentioned before, but I think in terms of practicalities, there needs to be, if someone is kind of up there for building these things, then good on them. Planning for elderly homes for single Muslim men and women, because there will be a need in terms of care, because they will not have children to care for them when they get old. So who's going to care for the elderly singles who are Muslim? And again, we need to think about the issues around maybe marrying for companionship, which we don't talk about as well. We always talk about marriage with a view to producing children, but again, for older couples and for people who can't conceive, we need to kind of think about companionate marriages and companionate relationships as a viable reality, and as something that we should be speaking more openly about, I think. Marrying without the expectation of children. So I just want to kind of leave on that matter, on that moment there. Thank you for listening. Sorry if it's been a bit of a whirlwind and I've sent some of you to sleep. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sister Fauzia, for a very insightful a lot of insight into the situation of marriage today. Because we're coming up to Maghrib in about 15 minutes, there is a possibility that we could sort of just continue after Maghrib if people are interested. But for now, I think we just want to open up the discussion. Basically, any questions that people may have about any of the things that we discussed today, the forum's really open to you, so we want to get you involved as much as possible. And I think we'll take a break from Maghrib, and then we'll have another maybe 15-20 minutes afterwards if people are willing to do that.
I have a question in terms of the sister who said that from the mosque side we can help the community to engage in the marriage. But we face the same things from the mosque as well, but you said the checklist. So when anybody asks us, do you have anything for my son or my daughter, then when we ask them, what are you looking for, then this checklist, whether this mosque imam or myself or anybody, I don't think so you can able to match it. So how can we resolve this?
The expectations need to be...
This expectation is too high nowadays.
I mean, the reality is that there'll always be a checklist. I mean, how do you sort of whittle that checklist down and make it more realistic? I suppose that's the way to do it. I mean, not having a checklist is also be irresponsible. You need to have some sort of a preference list, but it's a case of prioritising that list and making it more simple so that marriage is easier rather than difficult.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, yes, a realistic checklist is the easiest way to get what you want. I think the issue here is that a lot of us think that we can make choices and not face the consequences of those choices. So what many people need to realize is that you can say no to every proposal. You can walk out of marriage events. You can swipe left on everyone. It's your choice. But there's a consequence for that. So when you get the consequence, don't cry about it. Because that's the logical consequence of your decisions, right? And I think a lot of people, like you said, this idea of there's going to be someone better. You know, maybe you'll meet a brother, it's a nice brother, you even like him, but somewhere in the back of your mind you're thinking, but is he the best that I can do? Is this the best one that I can have? Maybe I can put him to the side and see if I can wait and see if there's someone else who might be more suited because he doesn't have this, he doesn't have that. But the reality is, and we keep saying this, I hope that even just one person takes this advice and actually runs with it. There is no one perfect out there. Nobody. Not even you. You are not perfect. And any person you meet for marriage will not be perfect. It's like what Brother Nasir said. What can you tolerate? Stop working from the top down and work from down up. If you work from your ideal down to your realistic, you're going to feel worse every time you go down. Every time you cross something off your list, you're going to feel like you're settling. Like you're kind of cheating yourself, like you're kind of playing small, this type of language. Don't work from the top down, work from the bottom up. So what's my baseline? What can I not do without? And for Muslims, it's very, very easy. Alhamdulillah, we've been given a blueprint. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us what the baseline should be. And we need to internalize that as our baseline. So this is my baseline, I will not go below this. These are my non-negotiables. Then, what things can I tolerate? What things are also things that I need, but are maybe not Islamic things, not baseline things? And then what things are nice to have? The shorter the list of non-negotiables, the more your chances of meeting somebody who fits the criteria. Because you have a small list of things that are absolutely these things here, no, I must have them, or no, I can't deal with them. So this is the same for brothers and sisters, but everyone needs to go in with the understanding that yes, you can say no, and you might feel empowered saying no, and you may think that you're doing a good thing for yourself, you're honoring your choices and all this kind of thing, but the reality is, if you get to that 40, 50-year-old mark, and you didn't manage to get what you wanted, which was a husband or a wife, that was a consequence of you not saying yes earlier on. Obviously, qadr Allah. So by the time you get to that stage, it's done, right? So whatever you're doing, it's your qadr. But for especially my young brothers and sisters here, what I was saying to the sisters when I was giving them some advice earlier was, be strategic. This, unfortunately, is a gendered conversation because a woman's, I'm not going to use the marketplace value stuff, but a woman's power, and when she has the most choice and options, is when she's younger. And that's a fact. Can we agree on that? for whatever reason, it's when she's younger. So the young ladies out there who are watching, you're 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, you are at a time now where you can pick. You have the options. Maybe you've got several proposals coming your way, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, but you have the options. You have what you want. That's a fact. After you get to 30, 40, you have to bring other things because you don't have the things that men who want to have a family want. Right, fertility is lower, blah, 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 blah. We won't go into all of that. But being strategic means thinking now, where do I want to be in 5, 10 years' time? Do I want to be married in 5 years' time? Would I like to have a family in 10 years' time? If so, how does that impact the decisions I make now? Because, sorry to go back to society again, society tells women that they can afford to have fun for 10 years after school, more or less. They can work, they can study, they can travel, make money, enjoy themselves, just explore themselves, live their best life for a good 10 years after school, but until they're about 28. And then you may want to think about getting a husband then. But the reality is, that's not how it works. Those 10 years that you spend fulfilling yourself and fulfilling your needs, there is a consequence for those years when you're 28, 29, 30. And one of the consequences is that you are much more difficult to handle because you are much more set in your ways, you are much more opinionated, probably a lot more resilient. You're your own person. So by that time, if you think of the checklist you have then, I don't take this, I don't take that, I don't accept this, I like a man who does this, I like a man who does that, and now you've shot yourself in the foot. So these kinds of conversations are uncomfortable because we like to believe that we can have it all and that we can do whatever it is that makes us happy and still get what we want at the end of it. When my message, especially to young women, is don't drink the Kool-Aid. What they tell you on social media about your options in your 20s and having a hot girl summer and all of that kind of thing, it damages you if you want to be a wife and be a mother one day. So don't fall prey to that. We as Muslims, we've been given the blueprint, mashallah. Like if we only followed the sunnah, none of this would be happening. Can we agree on that? If we were so simple and based, just say, somebody who fears Allah, somebody who has a good character, get married early, I'll be happy with a small mahar, I don't mind if he's not, super wealthy, we'll work together. Most of these problems we will not be having them. But this is the state of human ego.
I just want to say the choice issue is someone say something?
Is that Brother Nasir?
Is he on?
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Can I just add something in relation to...
That's like Jim. Okay, let Dr. Fauzia say a couple words and then I'll pass it on to you, inshallah.
No, I just wanted to sort of add to something that you were saying, sister. So, again, some of this discussion is because there's an assumption that people have a choice and that they can choose proposals, they can reject them. But a lot of people that I speak to are the ones who never get anyone asking after them. They're the ones who come to an event, nobody puts a tick by their name, nobody asks to speak to them. This is men and women, and they come to events with the hope and they come away disappointed, and there's disappointment after disappointment. This builds into a negative notion of the self, because as I said, not everyone looks like George Clooney, not everyone looks like Julia Roberts or a supermodel, and I speak to men who who are kind of not 5'6" or they're kind of living 5'2". 6 foot, yeah, 6.
Recording? It's live. Yeah, it will be recorded to publish. Oh yeah, after we edit it. I want to edit it and do it.
Brothers, can you look at sister?
How's life?
Mostly I came about 12. Oh, okay. So I missed like 2 hours of it, but for the rest of it, yeah, I've been here.
How's it been?
I got asked some questions.
Got a few gems out of there. You learned a few gems throughout this.
Yeah, I think I'm more aware of what's happening.
I was on that when they first started in Kent. I joined the road. Oh, you just came from Kent. Yeah. So you drive? Yeah, you've been on the road. I've been on the road. But what do you call it? I was joined at 10 and it was really interesting debate about like feminism.
Yeah, I heard that. That's where it started.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I had to look up yeah, man, it's super interesting. Man. It is.
I'm glad that we've had this. I just want to get Adam to come. So
I just spoke to him the other day.
I called him yesterday. I called him when I was leaving. I was like, how do you come?
You know what, like.
Once again, just a reminder for the sisters, we have a microphone to the sisters area. So if you could raise your hand, the sisters is holding the mic, she can see you, she can pass the microphone to you, inshallah. So you need to raise your hand and the sisters is there with the microphone, she can pass it on to you. Jazakallah khairan.
Yeah, you have to like make some effort to go through it. If he doesn't, then he's not going to get anywhere.
No, it's working. It's on.
It's on, yeah.
Yes, I'm very clear. I was getting a message from a few sisters that they were saying that the live feed, when I was speaking earlier, had cut.
So the best thing to do is when we start this session, just start repeat what you said, inshallah, and just pause.
One quick, I just asked one of the sisters again, they're saying that the link that was sent to them is not working.
But the link you sent for the sisters aren't working.
The link for the live.
It's on. It's on. But the YouTube is on. Tell them to click that same link again.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the final session of this conference. For those who are not able to connect, I think the recommendation is to click on the YouTube link for Kazahor Masjid. If you click on that, you should be able to join the session.
There's 10 people on it right now, so clearly it's working.
I mean, the fact that we're on this session now means that it's working, so you just need to connect to the right channel. So it's
maybe refresh
YouTube.
Maybe refresh.
Yeah, or refresh your system. I think that usually helps. So before we had the break from Maghrib, Brother Nasir had received a question that we were going to address. So if you'd just like to repeat the main gist of the question and then proceed to answering that.
Okay, so first and foremost, we can't forget the plug that I made for my own services for international matchmaking. Soft Light, DM me on Instagram if you want personalized private matchmaking. I can't forget that. So the question, and the point that I was making for sisters as well who are more mature, this was not heard according to those in the chat. Please make the deal. Self-assessment in terms of where you are, what the value is for the market. That's important. And that value has nothing to do with your worth as a person. Never put your worth on the table. It's not on the table for discussion. Your worth is fixed when your Lord created you. What we're discussing here is purely value. Your value in terms that's placed on the attributes you bring to the market. That in the market we mean Muslim marriage market. The question that the sister said essentially was this. Can we spend time addressing single mothers, older single women, as well as addressing some solutions for them? And she also mentioned, can we address the stigma, the problem around, the problem of stigma around polygamy, as well as the issue of first wife privilege and ways to live polygamy in a good and healthy way? For all of those that want to give smoke, that's this sister's question, not mine. Although I'm here for the smoke.
I want to answer the question.
Do I want to answer the question?
Yes. Or do you want to start answering the question and then we can continue?
Not a problem. So my response to the question, my response would be first, for single mothers and those that are more mature, my sincere advice to, as your brother, as someone who's trained in counseling and coaching, my perspective to you would be get a coach or counselor therapist in your support system, build a support system, and look at where the areas you can improve on yourself to get your mind right and get your emotions in the best place possible. Because oftentimes what I'm finding with the clients that I have, which are majority sisters, is a lot of the baggage that they're bringing into the relationship is baggage from parents. Unhealed issues with their mother or their father, and as well as relationships that they've had that may not have been permissible. So deal with the baggage. We all have it. As I started out, we're imperfect human beings. So all of us are gonna have issues. And that's not me speaking, that's from the model. The model says the core principle, we're all fallible human beings. So again, fallible human beings, what can you tolerate? What can you not tolerate? Or what do you choose not to tolerate? It costs you too much to tolerate A, B, and C, no problem. But have the emotional toolkit, the insights to be able to do that self-assessment on self, and then make an informed decision, not an emotional decision, an informed decision. So that would be my suggestion for sisters that are older. Build a support system. Make sure you have within that support system a trained professional, someone that has a modality and an ear that can point out when you're speaking in an unhelpful manner towards yourself, when you're creating an unhelpful narrative that's going to produce unhelpful emotions that are going to get you the same unhelpful results. You need that in your corner. Second, and please assess your friends. If you don't have people in your circle that can give you honest feedback, not to hurt you, but to really give you honest, uncomfortable feedback, that's critical. And to this latter part, in terms of the stigma around polygamy, I think it speaks to something that we talked about earlier, wherein that community leaders were walking on eggshells when it came to women within the community, not wanting to offend. And thus, real issues like polygamy may not have been addressed, and may not have been addressed in a very direct manner. What this sister and other sisters have, messaged me about is that the reality is polygamy is happening. But is it happening in a healthy manner? And that's the problem. So the stigmatism that we have around, and I'll wrap up with this, the stigmatism that we have around polygamy only hurts women. And that's something I think, sisters, I hope you can get your head around, that you can really, really spend time to think about. You're only hurting other sisters when you create a stigmatism within the community of shaming women that engage in polygamy. So that's one piece. And the second piece is polygamy is just like I said in terms of earlier, the Ummah is comprised of individuals, marriage is comprised of individuals, and polygamy, which is a valid form of marriage, is comprised of individuals. When you have individuals that do not know how to understand their thinking, regulate their emotions, you have problems. Because frankly, when I work with sisters who are engaged in a community or entertaining it, the first thing that I address is, why are you allowing yourself to feel shame on what others are saying? Why are you giving that much weight and meaning to what some random auntie in the community has to say? But that comes back to working with someone and having someone with a trained ear in the support system. So I'll stop there, but that's what I would say. And the uncomfortable piece that will give me the smoke is, sisters, stop waiting until you're 40 or 41 and older to start entertaining polygamy. the uncomfortable truth, after you reach 33, 35, it better be, I would suggest, it be one of your options on the table, if not younger. I'll stop there.
Thank you for that clarification. We've got some questions from sisters at the back, so if the sister would like to pose a question, please.
Thank you, Brother Mustafa. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you to all the speakers who have imparted their great wisdom upon us. And I'd like to devote the remaining time for our younger guests today, both the young ladies and young gentlemen, to speak up about your fears, your battles and your challenges in the search for marriage, so that you can get some advice in the remaining time we have from us oldies. And I think this lady would like to go first.
I apologize, no disrespect. But can we also have other panelists address the question? Because that question is from a sister who I think she wants to hear what the panel has to say about those important issues that's actually a factor within that community there.
Okay, let's do that then. Okay, so we will address the question that the sister mentioned, but let's finish this question. Yeah.
Bismillah. Anybody following my YouTube channel here? Oh, mashallah, all the sisters. So you probably know we've been speaking about polygamy a lot on the channel, and the reason for that is polygamy is happening. Whether it's public or private, whether it's working or it's not working, whether it's healthy or unhealthy, it's happening. Now, the question for us as a community is, as Brother Nasir said, how can we facilitate healthy plural marriage? We know the statistics. We know the number of single mothers. We know the numbers of unmarried older sisters. We know the numbers of people who have tried and haven't managed to find someone. We also know, men, and this is anecdotal, but maybe you know a brother who is in a marriage, he's not happy, he's not fulfilled for whatever reason, whether it's physical, emotional, or otherwise, but he has children with his wife, and he does not want to divorce her, right? What the brother mentioned about polygamy is put out there as something that damages women. And I've heard people saying this, people come on my channel and said this, that polygamy is for the benefit of men and women suffer as a result of polygamy. Now, if you look at the parties involved in a polygamous marriage, of course that doesn't make sense. Because yes, there is an initial wife who potentially did not want a co-wife, but that co-wife is a woman. And now, where she was single before, she now has a husband. She has a husband, she has, inshallah, protection, some measure of provision, some stability. And another thing that I want to mention as well is, again, drawing from society, we've come to a stage where we believe that men bring nothing more than money to the table. And a man who doesn't bring enough money is worthless. So if you don't pay for all the things or provide as I want, what's the point of you? And I want to mention that the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created men and women, as we know, is different. A man who is in his masculine brings a lot more to a woman's life than just money. He brings what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, he brings the qawam. And women, we need that. We don't want to hear it, and we don't like to admit it, but we need it. So a friend of mine, she was like pushing back. She said, my husband, he lets me do what I need to do. Like, he's not the boss of me, right? I said to her, okay, so in your household, if you order takeaway every day for the week, is your husband going to have something to say about that? She said, yeah, he probably will mention it. I said, that's him keeping you in line. If you decide to leave the house in skinny jeans tomorrow, is your husband going to have something to say about that? She said, yeah. I said, that's him keeping you in line. It's not a bad thing. We have stigmatized the qawam. We have stigmatized masculinity, and that's why I kind of pushed back when I heard toxic masculinity being used, because I fear that when people use that phrase, toxic masculinity, a lot of the time, they're actually just talking about normative masculine traits that are praiseworthy in our deen. Ghayra is a praiseworthy characteristic in our deen. Now, can it be taken to an extreme? Yes, but we're not here talking about extremes. We're talking about healthy ghira.
Just on that point, it's,
Please, yeah, take it away.
perhaps it's not just about the fact that these traits which are praiseworthy in the deen are being sometimes called toxic masculinity. Ghira or anger or male jealousy for protective care, they can, there are verses in the Quran and Hadith about these things. Okay, when we think about anger, toughness, we quite often think of Umar radiallahu anhu. But the difference between Umar radiallahu anhu's anger and my anger is that his came from ruh, from an ego that was subdued for the sake of Allah, and I'm not quite there yet. When the ghayra of that Sahabi manifested itself in whatever ways, okay, protective jealousy over his women folk, my ghayra doesn't quite come from there, and the proof of that is, okay, in my life, I don't even know what it means in Islam to have spiritual virtues. I'm still using the language of either the streets or social sciences, which is not quite prophetic. That becomes the issue, Sister Naima. Not that we men don't have anger, we men don't have ghayra, we men don't have this. It's that consistently over 40 years, our scholars have been saying here, that actually, unless men in this, because qawama is a big thing, okay, but when qawama is done, when al-rijal qawamun ala nisa, men are qawama, maintainers or protectors over women. We can do that from an ego way. And we can rationalize it through our kind of modern learning, okay? Or we can do it through a rule way. We need to ask this question, and this is my difficulty. It's my difficulty with Muslim life coaches, it's my difficulty with Muslim da'is. When people haven't sat at the feet of spiritual masters and scholars, men and women, okay, who are, who they learn from, we're talking about inward spiritual policies of the heart, okay? Even this thing about perfection, that's not the Islamic. The Islamic tradition is many men have reached perfection, but few women have. So actually, from the point of view of Allah, there are perfect kamil men, and inshallah, there are a few kamil women as well. So this thing that we're all flawed, we're probably, if you're like me, then we're probably all flawed, no doubt at all. My point here is that I think we're missing a huge point. It's not that we don't have any value going on here, it's that if we don't bring it back to core roots, spiritual, Islamically virtuous qualities, then what we're doing is we're trying to tinker with God's creation of the soul and the heart in a way that isn't quite using His message, His medicine. And so my concern has been when brothers come to me, and we're talking about 39 years in the community, right? Okay. So excuse me if I do have something to say, right? 39, and what is common is that plural marriages, all right, is there in the Sharia. And inshallah, hopefully if it's done well, it will work. But what we have to contend with, okay, someone like myself who tends to be the last port of call when things have gone really wrong, okay, is, well, you know what, you went into it with ego and not a little bit of rule. We're probably never going to be angelic creatures of that caliber, probably not. Again, if you're like me, then probably not. But we can try to go in there with minimizing our nafs, our ego, and kind of trying to get the best out of whatever raw spiritual quality we can. And that way, here's the point, and here's the missing thing. God, who seems to be left out of our equation of barakah, of fixing the hearts, he only wants us to tie our camels and then trust in Allah. He doesn't want us to untie our camels and trust in Allah. But right now we're doing more than tying our camels. We're tying our camels, we're clamping our camels. It seems like then we're covering it with a dome and whatever. No, there is a responsible amount of tying your camel. But what about trusting in Allah? I mean, I don't want to get philosophical here, but look, didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say in the Quran, مَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. It was not you who threw, when you threw, but it was Allah who threw. That's an odd one, isn't it? Allah is saying to his Prophet in this Quranic verse, it was not you who threw some dust against the enemy, pebbles against the enemy. It was not you who threw, when you threw, but it was Allah who threw. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from the believing creature, what he wants from us is Allah Akbar, which is literally make Allah the foreground, make him the app, make him the operating system, make him the visible thing, make him the trumpet, and you as a human creature do what has been nominally required of you and put that trust in Allah. So when Brother Nasir is saying, you know what, look, maybe use polygamy as an option, maybe, 40, definitely if you're 40 or something like that, even younger still, what he's trying to say to you is, look, Allah has legislated this, and there are inner and outward wisdoms, we may not see them all. Don't discount it. Don't discount it. Don't rationalize it away. And maybe it won't be good for you, but it might be good for another person. So don't discount it. Because the divine wisdom has taken into consideration these things. But we won't rush into it like balls in a china shop, for sure. And so if men can spend more time in trying to be men in terms of not so much psychological re-engineering, unless we consider psychological, psycho-spiritual, and that there's something to do with the heart, the qalb, then maybe it will become, things will be better. And same thing with sisters. If sisters come out at this, and Ustad Al-Amin has been saying this from the morning, why are you, oh sisters, grabbing a narrative outside of the healing light, the healing remedy of Islam? Why are you grabbing a secular, feminist, postmodern narrative or whatever we're grabbing? Why not just trying to hang on in whatever way we can to the healing balm of Islam? And it may sound cliche now, Quran and Sunnah, and I'm not saying it doesn't require work, but let's bring Allah into the equation. There is nothing like marriage for two people who love each other. Why did the Prophet say that? It's not because when you put your name on a contract, there's somehow love will come into it. And if you say, kabiltu, I do, I accept that. No, it's because of Allah. Two people did something to please Allah and draw closer to their Lord, and the divine reciprocity will do the rest. If Allah's not in the equation, our loneliness could happen, because all those things we've listed are postmodern realities that we really can't get out of. We can maybe minimize, we can kind of, fix a little bit. On the whole, though, it's the nature. I mean, ever since the social scientists, ever since the late 18th century, they've been talking about these things. Ever since existential philosophers have been writing about modernism will cause suicide, we've been in that. We're in that. We might end up being lonely, but if we have Allah as a friend, the loneliness is more manageable. If I fail, and I'm not intending to fail, but if I fail in a marriage, it doesn't mean, as Brother Nasir said, my worth is with my Lord. And once that is a reality in our life, it's not that we won't be sad of being rejected, but it will be manageable. So can we focus on that as the underlying engine that needs to be driving this, and all that sense?
There's often we're focusing too much on the mechanics of it, which is definitely important, but there is an underlying spiritual imperative which we often forget, and as a result, it all becomes a process that we go through, and then eventually it runs out of steam because it's not being nourished with the guidance of
and we don't just see that like kind of marriage things. We see that in dawah. We've taken dawah as a mechanism, but actually the shepherds of the souls, the ulama and the spiritual masters of Islam, the shepherds of the souls, the da'i doesn't quite get what it means to shepherd a soul, but he is good at arguments and apologetics of Islam. But it's just different things. The prophets came not to teach us to argue or psychoanalyze. They came to attach souls to the ultimate reality.
Marriage is half of the being. It's not just something that you can. It's half of being marriage.
Indeed.
It's not something small that you can just push across.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're talking
Which
about
is
big
which
subject.
is why we're here, and it's just the nine
The other half is hidden somewhere.
You're
Half
right.
of your being.
Definitely.
We wanted to get some more questions in, but did you want to just add to that?
Yeah, because I didn't. I will keep it. I'm so sorry. Again, I've been having some conversations with some of the sisters and the young sisters, and I think, based on what the Shaykh was saying, the bottom line for us all is to accept the assignment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given every single one of us an assignment to worship Him with the opportunities that He has given us individually. Some of us will marry, some of us will stay married for the rest of our lives, some of us will marry several times, some of us may never marry. But every one of us can keep Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the center of our affairs and the return to Him as the central goal. Because actually, keeping the return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as your primary focus makes life very simple. You make decisions based on that. Is this taking me towards my goal or away? Is this helping me to achieve my goal or is it not? And make decisions in that way and find other people who are living that same reality. Because it's only going to be a few. But tuba lil ghuraba. You may be the minority and you may get smaller and smaller and smaller as time goes on, but find each other. Find each other, find each other's kids. I'm saying after your presentation, I just said it's time to bring back arranged marriage. Khalas. Like we need the arranged marriage system back in place again.
There was, I think, the sister at the back, and then David got up front as well.
Excuse me, just one quick point, and again, the spiritual piece is important, but understanding how to regulate your emotions is critical. It's critical because I can believe in my Lord. Look, we're hypocritical. Is it that our marriages, who we marry, is ordained by Allah, or is it not? Because I'm hearing both. So if we're saying that our marriage is ordained by our Lord, then is it not a demand that we're placing on our Lord that it must be a monogamous marriage? So Allah has written this person for you, but no, it can't be because this is polygamy. So what I'm essentially saying is, yeah, I will accept someone as long as it's a monogamous situation. You are then putting your Lord in a box mentally that He cannot prescribe this for you. My point here is this: that's all a thinking problem. That has nothing to do with your Lord. That has everything to do with understanding and the ability to address your thinking and emotions. So I get the spiritual piece. I'm not in any way saying anything against that. But I am not finding, again, because of the role I'm in, I'm not finding the spiritual piece be the issue. What I'm finding is people don't know how to regulate intense emotions when they don't get what they want.
Sorry, Brother Nasir, maybe we're cross-purposing here. I'm not denying what you're saying, and the word spiritual includes emotions. Emotional content, wherever we think secularly wise it comes from, it is an ultimate matter of the heart. It is considered either a virtue or a vice. Emotions. My emotion of anger can be a spiritual quality or an opposite of spiritual quality. My emotion of jealousy, same thing. So we're actually just using two slightly different languages, but we're actually pointing to the same reality. This thing about emotions, you're spot on, and it's undeniable.
Sure, we can continue this afterwards. There are a lot of people waiting, so it's just one minute.
I appreciate you bringing up that point because that's a very critical. Thank you.
We have a lot of people asking questions, so yes,
I just wanted to say, mashallah, Shaykh, thank you so much for all your contribution, all of you, jazakallah. What the Shaykh is saying is spot on, mashallah. You're really touching my heart, mashallah, jazakallah, Shaykh, because you're right, the spiritual is everything. The spiritual is when we are connected to Allah, it's an attachment issue, it's an emotional issue, whatever you call it, it goes back to the same thing. Whenever we are attached to Allah, everything is in the right place. Whenever we attach ourselves to anything else, that's when things become blurry. Yeah. So it's everything is spiritual.
Bless you, that's what I was trying to say.
I understand. From the beginning, I was on your side.
May Allah bless you for making it very clear.
Whatever we call it is the same thing. The other point I wanted to make was we have two ends of the spectrum. There are some sisters that have, again, it goes back to attachment issues. They didn't have the right upbringing and the attachment is in the wrong place. So they have very low self-esteem, low confidence. And at a very young age, they get approached by any brothers and they will say, as Sister Naima was saying, whoever comes to you first, don't say, I'm going to get someone better. And they have a self-esteem problem. So they will just go with the first person that comes to them, and they are at a very young age, and they will just say, you know what, I might not get anyone better. So they will just marry them. And then through the years, they will realize, and as they grow older, they will realize that their self-esteem starts to grow, and their marriage is not matching with their self-esteem anymore. On the other end of the spectrum, there are some sisters who have, alhamdulillah, they have no problem with their attachment issues, and they are very close to their Lord, and they grow older and they reach their 30s and 40s, but because they have their attachment was at the right place, alhamdulillah, they find themselves with their right partner, whichever age they are. And the best example is they were not Muslim at the time, but Khadija, she had baggage, she had children, she was older, but she married the Prophet ﷺ. So the issue isn't the age, the issue isn't the confidence, and it is actually everything is about self-esteem and how you see yourself and your attachment to Allah. So that's what I wanted to, that differentiation, because I have seen all the sisters, mashallah, marrying the man of their dreams, the right person.
Some sisters get married younger, and it's a catastrophe now.
And then the children are involved. So even this issue of polygamy, how can we talk about polygamy when the monogamy isn't even in the right place and the marriage is in a crisis where people are all narcissistic? And how can we say polygamy is the solution when monogamy isn't even helping people? I mean, yeah, it's a crisis basically.
Where is that a criteria? Where is that criteria that for it to be in order, monogamy has to be in order? Like, how many marriages of monogamy have?
She's not saying it has to be in order. She's just saying
Do
that.
you think we can really practice polygamous marriage in Europe, for example? Do you think it is possible for men to, in terms of financial aspect? So when you say, can a man afford, the first wife as he can afford the second or third wife? Is it? Can we practice?
Yeah. So there's a question. Can
yes.
So sorry, no,
So I'll ask Sister Naima to answer that question.
Okay, so sisters, you know me, I love you, and we've had this conversation online before. If you haven't seen it, you can go on YouTube and see it. As soon as polygamy comes up, emotions start coming up. I see it every single time. Not with every single person, but in general. Sisters in general do not like the idea of polygamy, and that's a fact, right? And even if they won't say with their mouths, I don't like it, they'll say things like, I don't like it for me. I can't cope with that. Or they will try to disqualify it. Only if this, only if he's doing that, only if he's this type of man, only if she's this type of sister. I can handle it if she's a widow. I can handle it if she's old. But as a young woman, no, I can't. And my question is, no ego involved, and I have no stake in this conversation. What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say? That should be the criteria. Justice. Khalas. It's not a woman's choice. Most women wouldn't choose it if they're the initial wife. That's true. Now, are there women who will choose to become a second wife? Yes, there are. There are women who will say, that one, that's for me. Either because she doesn't have the bandwidth to be an only wife, or she has children that she's looking after, or she's older, or she doesn't want to have kids, or whatever the case may be. There are women who will opt for that, especially if the man is perceived as valuable. If he is the kind of man that she wants, there are women who will say yes to that. But the reality is, sisters, for us to have an honest conversation about this, we have to first accept our own biases. And there are sisters here, mashallah, Nigerian sisters, who actually have like 2-3 moms themselves, and they were listening to us talking earlier, and they were saying, this is not our reality. Like, we have no problem with polygamy. I have have two mums, I grew up with 30 siblings, right? I'm gonna wrap up. Let's not muddy the waters. Polygamy is for those men who can do it. Are there men who can do it? Yes, there are. Is your husband one of them? Maybe not. But there are men who can. So let's not muddy the waters in a general discussion by personalizing it and saying, okay, but my husband can't even do this. And well, we're renting at the moment. We haven't even got our own house. This is not Allah's criteria. Sorry, Shaykh, am I correct in this?
No, but polygamy works very well. It works very well in terms of when people know where they are in terms of the attachment. It goes back to the attachment.
When it's for the sake of Allah.
When it's for the sake of my own father has 2 wives and I have a great relationship with both of them and it's going very well. Alhamdulillah, there's no problem. I'm not against polygamy. What I'm saying is the people have to be in the right place, correct, in order to be able to practice it the way it is supposed to be practiced.
But that's the same for marriage, though. That's the issue here. For marriage to work, you have to be in the right place. For marriage to work, our intentions have to be pure, even if it's just one man and one woman. But we don't have that conversation because everyone assumes the monogamy. And once you start to say polygamy, people start to put caveats. Oh, but he has to be this, but he should be making sure he's doing these sunnahs as well before he does that. It's unfair. It's an unfair conversation.
But maybe it's worth adding to what you said, that some societies and some cultures, monogamous, or at least in principle monogamous cultures, will find polygamy difficult. Many of us Muslims, including men, okay, not men from below the waist, men from the heart and the brain upwards, even some men in this culture I have found find the concept of polygamy strange, but they love to do it because that's thinking waist downwards, okay? And so women can. And the beauty of Islam is simply this. If a Muslim man or woman, but usually woman, has a problem with polygamy in the sense that intrinsically, just by nature, she doesn't like it, then the Sharia excuses that. The Sharia excuses that. Yeah. But if she doesn't like it because it's something revealed in Revelation, that's an issue. That is an issue of Iman. I suspect all Brother Nasir is trying to say is that don't discount polygamy as part of a multifaceted solution. I'm not quite sure he's saying that it's going to be easy and it's all going to be rosy-dozy. I suspect, and my experience with brothers in polygamous marriages, so anecdotally, 7 out of 10 fail, and 6 of them are really bad failures. I mean, really bad.
Is that because they go in with the wrong mindsets? And they fetishize the thing rather than actually...
And there isn't a supportive structure. And there isn't a supportive structure. The environment doesn't help.
But it is, but you know, it has its problems as just Muslim single marriage has its problems. I think we're just saying, don't discount it, and let's start by, like Brother Nasir was saying, it's kind of ideas. Let's get the idea out of our head that there is something, it's a stigma. Let's get that idea out of the head, and then maybe Allah will bless us in so many other ways. Who knows? Because what we're doing is we're trying to align our will and our likes with the divine will and the divine likes. And in the end, marriage or life or living is about at-tahabbub ilallah bima yarda. At-tahabbub ilallah bima yarda. At-tahabbub ilallah bima yarda. Becoming beloved to God by doing what pleases Him.
Thank you very much for your answer. So I will quickly ask my question. First of all, Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I want to ask about, this is more of the mental health, towards mental health, about the fear of sacrifice. For example, if I'm a woman and I'm getting a good match and I have to move to a different city or maybe leave my work. So I have this fear of sacrifice, like what if my spouse loses the patience level or tolerance after 2 years or 6 months of marriage and then he wants to quit. And then I would feel that what my sacrifice, was it worth it? So it's more over, I know it's not more over reality, but as a fear. I have a fear of sacrifice that I think a lot of girls have, because we love a lot. For women, they will do anything for love. But they will sacrifice whatever they have, but they have this fear now that will it be worth it? So how can I handle that fear?
It's all the intention. And I was saying this to a sister before because she was listening to us and she was saying, these things you are talking about, all the things you're advising sisters to do, we did them. And it still didn't work out. 2 divorces down the line. And I said to her, as Muslims, we need to remember something. The outcome is not in our hands of anything. None of us can guarantee an outcome in anything. No matter how much we want it, no matter how hard we work for it, no matter how much money we pay for it, we cannot guarantee the outcome. That is the province of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the outcome. We just do the actions. Make the intention, we do the actions, the outcome is in the hands of Allah. So, with regards to your question, sis, if you're going to go into marriage, do it for God's sake. Do it fi sabilillah. You're going to have to sacrifice. Everyone will. Man, woman, everyone. There will be sacrifices. But if you do them fi sabilillah, you will never lose. That's the cheat code. That is the ultimate cheat code about life in general. The problem with us is that we are happy to sacrifice for the dunya, but when it comes to marriage, we don't want to sacrifice. But when it comes to a degree, or losing weight, or traveling the world, we're happy to sacrifice. We're happy to pay lots of money. We're happy to miss out on other opportunities in order to get this dunyawi outcome. This, we can say like a self-centered outcome. It's ours. This is my thing. But not marriage. Oh no. God forbid I sacrifice for a marriage. But a marriage, that, as we've said, we've been saying all day, and this is men and women, this is not a woman's thing. A marriage is bigger than you, it's bigger than your personal experience. It's so much bigger. And then hopefully in another session we can break down, maybe we need to remind ourselves as Muslims how marriage actually works and how it benefits the individual, man, woman, children, mothers-in-law, fathers-in-law, society, economy, all of these things. Because it's like we've forgotten.
So can I just ask the sister, when you were saying that after marriage, 2 years you could get bored, and then I've lost my job, and was your focus on, well, now I'm left with nothing, or was it the fear that, oh, he could change 2 years down the line?
Fear of sacrificing and putting in all the efforts, and in the end, it's not worth it.
Okay, so Sister Nagi, you spot on. You answered that, understood that well.
Can I answer this as well?
Just before we do that, please have a speaker on the panel, Fauzia, to actually say something.
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, I kind of endorse everything that Sister Naima said in relation to the issue of sacrifice. I just want to add, what is the definition of sacrifice? What do we mean when we're talking about sacrifice? And you also kind of, that's what you highlighting there. But sometimes we can think of something as a sacrifice, but not realize that, I mean, I'm not speaking in any kind of religious way or metaphysical way, I'm just speaking purely from observations.
As long as it's not a Picard anecdote.
No.
but the data one, maybe.
No, maybe. But it's just, we don't know. What might be perceiving as a sacrifice at this particular point in our lives may actually have a lot of barakah in it at a later time. You never know. Some people will talk about the fact that they've had to sacrifice their careers for their parents or for their children or for their husband, but you don't know that in maybe 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line, there may have been something that was better for you. You may have been spared something. So if you feel that you put a lot of effort into something, it hasn't gone into nothing. It's not wasted. Your effort is never wasted. There is always value in what you put in. It might not be for that person. It will be, but it will ultimately come back to you, I think. And I just wanted to say the one comment about the sisters who are older and single, and then something very brief about polygamy, and some, again, just observations from women's conversations I've had. So the issue about women who are older, and I speak to a lot of women who are older. Older, we're talking women in their 40s and 50s. There comes a time where also your desires wane as well. So your interest in marrying decreases. And And that's a hormonal thing, it's also to do with age as well. But I think one of the fundamental things with anyone seeking marriage is firstly, know yourself and be content in yourself, because we put a lot of emphasis in expecting someone else to make us happy. The happiness, we need to have that sense of self-belief and contentment in our own selves first. Somebody else will not come and make your problems disappear. It's not, again, this is too much Hollywood coming into this kind of thinking, that there's going to be some sort of romantic, knight in shining armor, or even a princess in some kind of, beautiful kind of vision or something like that. It's not going to solve an issue that you have yourself. So we need to do a lot more work on ourselves. And in working on ourselves, we will then be able to appreciate what we see with other people as well, in other people. One of the kind of comments I have about polygamy and some of the things that women have spoken to me about, and again, I'm not speaking about this in any religious way at all, it's just the kind of the manifestation and something to do with the way that polygamy in men's minds operates. Not all men, but some men who weaponize polygamy as a kind of compensation for women. So women who are older, who will not be able to give them children, they'll say, well, I'll marry you as long as you let me have a second wife. So what it does is it creates a sense of inadequacy in the woman that they're marrying, if they say that if they add a caveat to it and say, but because you can't give me children, or there are younger women who for whatever reason are found out that they're infertile and they declare that, men will say, well, as long as I can have a second wife, I'll marry you. And what it does is it just, in the woman's mind, it creates a sense of inadequacy, that I'm not good enough for you, that you have to have a second wife. And I think there's something that we really need to, that's a fundamental, I think, problem with the way polygamy is thought about by some men. And some women as well.
I'm sorry, may I, please? I think, as to your point about the feeling of inadequacy, I think that when you have men and women looking at the situation, I'm sure, I could be wrong, but I think the men who heard what you said, they didn't see a problem with it, right?
Not at all.
What's wrong with a man saying, I'll marry you, but because you can't have kids, let me marry someone else so I can have kids with them? Sorry, did anybody from the men, do you think that that's wrong? You shouldn't have said that. It's okay. Put your hand up.
To say it, yes.
Okay.
To say it in a certain way, it's yes.
So to say it is wrong, but what about the idea?
To say it in a certain way.
Okay, what about the principle?
The principle,
The principle has been enacted by even righteous men throughout the past.
Okay.
Whether they would have said it like that insensitively.
Fair enough.
Exactly.
Okay, but do we have more or less a consensus that from a man's mind it makes sense? If you're older or you are in some way incapacitated for what I would like from this marriage, it's I will marry you, but I will also marry somebody else. So for the men, it's a completely rational, logical thing to think. How many sisters feel that that's wrong? Like that would make you feel like he's treating you as less than, or that you're not worthy, or that there's something wrong with you? Put your hands up. So this may be a male-female thing, but also a rational versus emotional lens. Because if somebody has an outcome that they want to achieve, I've got a lot of flack over the last year or so, having conversations about single mums. Because single mums have a unique set of challenges. Single dads probably do too, but they are fewer in number. Certainly on the apps it seems they're fewer in number. But with single mums, they have the responsibility a lot of the time in our community of the children. Men don't seem to take their children on divorce in general, even though Sharia-wise apparently, according to the ulama, they should be taking responsibility of the children. However, in our society, that's not happening. So you have a lot of sisters, young and old, who have often sole responsibility of the children. Many of them would like to marry again. Many of them would like to marry a good man. Ideally, as we saw earlier, they would like to marry a man who will step in as a husband fully, meaning he will provide, and as a father figure for the children. Sisters, am I right? Right. So, therein lies the rub, because that expectation is a high expectation. The expectation that you will meet the quality of man that you want, who will step in fully and be the man that you want is a high expectation. And that is, I believe, why a lot of sisters who have children, who are single moms, suffer when they're having these conversations. Because they have a very high standard. They want a man who's hafiz, he's religious, he's good looking, he's tall, he's wealthy, or not wealthy, but he can provide, he's a good father, he wants to be a father to her kids, he shouldn't have baggage, he shouldn't have kids of his own. Even the sister who has her own, mashallah, beloved baggage, we're going to use baggage in quotes, she has a long checklist. And unfortunately, what we're seeing now is that a lot of men are saying, no, I'm not prepared to do that. I'm not going to come into a situation where I'm going to be third, fourth, fifth, sixth priority, take full responsibility financially, but not be able to discipline the children. Because they're not my kids, because you don't want me to, and anybody who's had a stepfather situation, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I guess what I'm saying about being realistic is understanding that if you as a man or a woman come to marriage conversations with a child or 2 or 3, if you have extra financial responsibilities that you need help with, if you have incapacitated in any way, if you are infertile, if you are disabled, you are at a disadvantage. It sounds awful, but it's just the truth. Because everyone comes into the conversation with an ideal in their head, men and women. Women would want somebody who can cover all the bills. Brother, if you're on £5 an hour, you're at a disadvantage. That's a fact. Now, what are you going to do about it? That's the question. So for sisters who have any kind of quote-unquote disadvantage, if you would like to maintain your sense of self, you have to separate your worth, which is, as we said, your worth as a believer, as a creation of Allah, and do the work on yourself to be grounded in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then be realistic about the value that you are able to bring to a marriage. Because it's not the same. And anyone who's been married to a woman who has children, or a man who has children, will understand what I'm talking about. So I don't want to labor the point too much, but I think the point I wanted to make is, women, it's in our best interests to be less emotional about these things and try to be more rational, and to align ourselves with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us and what He needs and demands from us, rather than allowing the stuff that happens to impact us negatively, especially in terms of our emotions.
I think a lot of the time it's the execution of the second marriage where the issue is. Often it's done in a way where it's not above board. The sort of tone and the attitude that people sort of bring into the relationship is not a healthy one. And so as a result, it triggers people, and the thing sort of starts on a bad footing. Whereas if people came with the right kind of mindset from the beginning, it was clear, there was a support structure, people were sufficiently willing to accommodate it, then I think it would be a lot more successful. And there is a question that someone suggested, like...
Pardon me, I have a few comments about what has been said, if you don't mind.
Sure, you can just say a few comments, and there's one brother who's been waiting patiently. So, yeah.
Apologies. So, this is very important, because this one plug, please come to workshop tomorrow. Because this discussion has really pointed out the overarching point that I'm making, the lack thereof of the ability to regulate our own thinking and emotions. Sisters, I'm going to give you the uncomfortable truth. If you feel inadequate, own it. That's on you. You produce your emotions because of the narrative you create about the brother saying that if you can't have children, then I would want to marry someone else. You created that negative narrative that then produced the emotion of inadequacy, of feeling depressed. So I think we have to make sure that we don't fall down this road of not really putting both brothers and sisters, but in this case, sisters, hold them accountable. That's uncomfortable to hear, but as long as we do this Disney fantasy of putting women on a pedestal, we're going to continue to have this disconnect between brothers and sisters. So again, just to recap the point that I'm making, if you feel inadequate, you need to go back. When you feel an intense emotion, that's a red flag for you to go back and ask yourself, what am I thinking? What am I telling myself? What is the narrative I'm creating? Because as I started off in the very beginning, thoughts produce emotions, not events, not what people think, feel, say, and do. And that, when you have that modality, you have a formula, that'll allow you to do what Sister Naima has mentioned in terms of being more rational, being more logical versus being emotional. We can say that, but are we giving people the formula, the modality to be able to do it? So that's an important point. The second point, I have to come back to the sister earlier, because this is why I said it's important to have in your support system someone with a trained ear. The sister led with fear. The sister's comment question led with an emotion. So the trained ear for me is, okay, so what is the emotional goal we want to get to? So this is the part of why you have to have a modality. Because the healthy alternative to fear is concern. Concern is what you have when you cross the street. You should be concerned, but you shouldn't be fearful as you cross the street. So sis, what I would say to you is, we already know the narrative that you've created to get you to fear. But what is the narrative you need to create to get to concern? Because concern is going to allow you to have clarity of thought. It's going to allow you to make an informed decision on if you should marry this brother or not. The other, and I'll stop with this, the last thing that a trained ear hears is the question, where's the evidence for this? Because sis, what you gave me was narratives in terms of, if I go there and then he quits his job after a month or two, where's the evidence that he would do that? Is this something that he hasn't demonstrated that? Is this a fear that you have from, sis, please don't personalize, this is not about you, just example. Is this a fear you have because this is something that you grew up seeing with your father, not keeping jobs? Or is this something that he's demonstrated that you showed it? He's already shown you in 6 months of getting to know him that he lacks responsibility as a man. Then the question becomes, and I'll stop, why are you still wanting to marry him? Is this also an issue of the fear of being alone because you're older? So again, sis, the point that I would say is, please, sister, have someone, whether it's a brother or a sister, in your support system that has a trained ear. Because what everyone else said was spot on. But what came to my mind was something totally different. Someone with a trained ear is going to give you the emotional goal you need to work to, and then challenge your thinking so that you get to that emotional goal.
Excellent.
There's
a workshop tomorrow, so a lot of these discussions, a lot of these things that we're talking about today, we'll be addressing in more detail tomorrow. So those who are interested, between 10 and 1 tomorrow at Canhole Masjid, and also if you want to join online, it's the same link that you've been using today. Just go onto that link and register for tomorrow's session, inshallah. Did you want to come back on this, or you now?
Is it a question?
Yeah. If not, then the sister at back and then
My only point is not necessarily what the sister said. I don't think we can discount the idea of perceived justice or injustices. Whether the sister experiences it herself or something she saw in her father, whatever, but the point being is, there is enough anecdotal evidences and examples in Muslim communities to know that sometimes the sister is unfairly done by for one reason or the other. And that now has become a grave concern for sisters. If we men don't understand, the Prophet ﷺ taught us the Bedouin principle. Leave alone any other principle. A prophetic revealed principle is the Bedouin principle. And he didn't call it that, but you know, the Bedouin comes from outside and says, "Ya Muhammad, give me something." And one of the companions was incensed by the lack of respect, ready to have words with the Bedouin. The Prophet said, "No, let it be." And he took the Bedouin in his house and he gave him something. And the Bedouin's quite pleased, and he's walking away quite pleased and chuffed with himself. And as the Bedouin is walking away, the Prophet ﷺ says, "Man bada jafa." Man bada jafa. Whoever lives in the desert becomes a bit rough and coarse. What's that about? All he was trying to say to his companions around him, that look, if you know where this man is coming from, his background, he's a Bedouin. He's not a city dweller, right? If you know where he's coming from, you'll understand why he behaves like that. If you understand why he behaves like that, you're able to then frame how you engage with him. And when you can frame how you can engage with him, you might be able to, bi'idhnillah, steer him to a better way. But it starts with man bada jafa. Empathize with where he's coming from. You don't have to agree with what he's doing or saying. Same thing, I find that a lot of these questions, sometimes they come down from, sisters are working on nafs, like often we brothers do, but sometimes they have experience from other sisters or from their experience, an injustice that doesn't seem to be getting addressed, which is, why does it seem to be the brothers are having it all? And that could be perceived or it could be real. But what the Prophet ﷺ does is he addresses perceived understandings and then puts them to one side. That's a perception, but actually, unfortunately, that's a wrong perception. Here is the reality. So if we're going to do healing, if we're going to try to reach out to each other to heal, to mend, we need to understand perceptions, perhaps before we get to the actual medicine itself. That's the prophetic way, and that's probably the wisest way. That way we'll be communicating on the same level. Yeah.
That's the point. Perception can be distorted. And the point that I was saying to the sister is this: there is a more helpful, constructive emotion, which is concern. So perception can be valid. But how is it best to address that? With the emotion of concern or the emotion of fear? There's no need to, fear is not a constructive emotion, period. Concern is. So that was the point that I was making. Yes, not negate what has been happening in the community or with her family that she's seeing, but what is that constructive emotion to have moving forward as you address that perception? And again, that's that emotional piece. Again, feelings are always valid, but the thoughts that underpin them may not be accurate. And we have to hold both brothers and sisters accountable for the thoughts and the narratives we create.
Sister at the back, we're really running out of time, but we'll take a couple more questions. Sister at the back.
Okay. I just have a quick point. I think it was in regards to the first session about feminism. My only issue really is it's not something that Muslim women have adopted from the outside. A lot of times it's within the family, the men in the family, the mum, pushing the narrative of, be successful, be independent, work. And then all of a sudden now, I think within the last year or two, it's almost like, why are Muslim women doing this? And it's something that we've grown up with. And we never really had either a space as well in the Muslim community to be a part of anything a lot of the time. And we found a lot of the times that we could, have success outside. So I think it's really unfair, and I think it's quite hypocritical as well to continuously blame Muslim women for a lot of the issues.
Anyone want to come back? Do you want to follow that up with another question?
Okay, so in the morning session, it was mentioned that the husband is a paradise, the paradise and hellfire for the women. So a sister was asking if you could elaborate on that point.
These things to the modern ear, they can be very insensitive. I accept. If I was very young, I would find this a bit strange. But the Prophet said that in one hadith, the pleasure of your Lord lies in the pleasure of your husband. There is a similar hadith about parents. The pleasure of your Lord lies in the pleasure of your parents. And the Prophet, so what that means is simply that providing the husband is asking something reasonable from the wife, and it's not unreasonable, nor is it disobedience to God, then Islam teaches that the Muslim wife is duty bound to honor her husband by fulfilling his wish or his command. Not to do so could be considered sinful. So in that case, the Prophet ﷺ is just pointing out to that part of marriage that just you're a good lady. That's what it's as if he's saying, you're a good lady. I just want you to keep this constantly in mind. Okay, he's not your Lord. He's not, but part of Allah's pleasure is obedience to husband in that which is not disobedience to God, nor is it unreasonable to her. That's what it actually means. But to the modern ear, when we don't really talk about obedience, I mean, Sister Naima used the word that I have not heard a sister utter other than perhaps my wife and a few people of that generation, of our generation, for ages, subservient. I actually thought we got rid of that word from the vocabulary in late modernity. But it's perhaps not subservient because we can use that English word and it has different connotations to different people. But we would have to use the word ta'a, or if you say in Urdu, ta'at, obedience. There is a Muslim wife is duty bound to be obedient to her husband in a way that the husband isn't duty bound to be obedient to his wife. But as our ulama say, as the scholars say, it's an unfortunate marriage if we're working on obedience. And if the husband has to keep putting on the captain's cap, oh, I'm the captain, I'm the captain. Either there's something pathologically wrong with the husband, or there is something wrong in the relationship with his wife, which requires more than just a act and a claim. So that's what it means, inshallah. So until very recently, Muslim sisters would probably have kind of learned that, yeah, whatever else I want out of marriage, I need to be honourable and obedient to my husband in that which is good. And this is a path that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How we express that in modernity, in recent times, I'm probably not the best person. Maybe Sister Naima could do a better job.
I've got another question. The sister was asking, after taking istikhara for marriage and do not get good feelings, what should one do?
After the istikhara, sister is not getting good feelings, or what?
Yes, after istikhara, sister is not getting good feelings about whichever decision she wants to make. What should she do? It's a generic.
No,
it may not necessarily be marriage.
So istikhara is a dua. Istikhara is a very special dua, but boil it down, it's still a dua. Okay? And so a dua, you know, when the Prophet talks about these things, he's generally talking about to someone who's got a basic sound level of faith. Maybe not that high, but it's sound level of faith. And they generally can tell the difference between kind of basic shaitanic whisperings and basic angelic inspirations. So if someone gets a bad feeling and from their istikhara, and through experience, because they generally pray and they generally try to keep away from the haram, and when they fall into the haram, they repent to God sincerely. And through their experience, they know that I should take this seriously, then they should take it seriously, either do another istikhara, or bad feeling is the result of my istikhara, let me move on to another prospective person. But if it's a matter of, I don't know the experiences of my istikhara, I would say in this day and age, given our lack of spiritual rootedness, maybe make another istikhara and go and discuss with wiser people, informed people about the person that you want to be choosing. I'm not quite sure we should be going on istikhara alone, only because this is an age in which Nasir is reminding us of this really passionately, where we do confuse emotions with right guidance. And that can happen in my istikhara as well. But those of you who feel that you're rooted in your istikhara through your experience, go with your istikhara.
Just a little question to the doctor. Did your research are published online or somewhere on your books? It's really interesting because as I discussed at meantime, there's no statistics, there's no, I would say, publications that provides information how to, as well to build our marriage, how to deal with the relationships we have. So just a simple question.
We couldn't find anything online of this substance, basically.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
I have a few things, but they're kind of mostly conference papers at the moment. I've been wanting to, it's just a time thing.
Okay.
I will do it.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. Assalamu alaikum, jazakallahu khairan for the wisdom that you are imparting to us today. It's amazing to see such a diverse panel. However, the reality on the ground, which I think before we even start talking about going into monogamous marriage, polygamous marriages, is the processes of actually finding a partner. And I used to really struggle when I go to marriage events face to face, because I think it's always better to meet people face to face. But there are underlying issues in the ummah, and that comes, I'm sorry to say, but like we have some discrimination still going on, which I think leaders in the community and ulamas and scholars need to be setting an example whereby if you have like multiple friends, Muslim friends from backgrounds, whether it's African, Middle Eastern, Asian, they don't get married to each other. They don't approach each other. And whilst maybe you might come from a very open background, because you're raised that way, like my parents are very open-minded. And in fact, my father is a convert from a different tribe and a background. But you know, when you go to these marriage events, the rejection and it really takes a toll. I have to be very honest here that it's something that we need to address these issues, because if we don't, we're going to keep having these dilemmas in our society. And perhaps in the USA, they're maybe more open-minded in mixing, because Allah says He made us into nations and tribes so that we may know one another. But unfortunately, and it's so sad to see, that the non-Muslims are doing a far better job amongst themselves, and we can still not accept each other. And really, it saddens my heart. So I just wanted to say that. Jazakallah khair.
That's absolutely a very relevant observation. We thought over the past, we've been doing these marriage events for the past 20 years. In 2003, we noticed, we thought by 2022 things would have changed, but to be honest, it's more or less the same. I mean, some people are more upset. The fact that people were discriminating on the basis of race. I mean, it's fine if people can have a preference for that, but when they openly sort of reject someone based on their background, I mean, we thought, but in the last 20 years that would have changed. It hasn't really changed substantially, or as much as one would expect.
SubhanAllah, I mean, just to anecdotally, I mean, so in our household, so my wife, we're both born and raised in the UK, but we have South Asian heritage. Parents came from India in the late 50s, early 60s. My oldest girl, she could not imagine getting married to an Asian, especially an Indian, Pakistani, Bengali Asian, okay? And then my youngest daughter, she recently told me the same thing. And my middle daughter had already told me this just during COVID. So I thought, alhamdulillah, this is really good. This is like, mashallah. And if they are kind of fairly typical of the Muslim generation, then that's really good. So now I've just heard this, I'm a bit sad.
Why are you sad?
Well, I'm sad because I had thought this polite or overt racism would have kind of diminished with our parents' generation, and that perhaps a younger generation would have been a little bit more sensible.
I think it depends on whether it's discrimination or whether it's preference.
No, so I don't deny preference, and preference has to be accepted. But kind of that kind of racism.
So the fact that I wanted to marry a black man and I wouldn't consider an Asian, is that racism, do you think?
So no, the reason why my children say it, so I don't know why you said it, but the reason why my girls say it, and my oldest is already married, is simply because, in their words, Asian Muslim men, unless they're extremely practicing and God-fearing, no way.
So then they're racist against Asians?
No, they may be, but I am. But I believe I have a justification for experience.
Okay, I'm not being privy for no reason. I think what I'd like to invite people to just take a step back. There is a reason why a Hausa family would prefer a Hausa daughter-in-law. There's a reason. There's a reason why a Bengali mother would prefer to have a Bengali son-in-law. There's a reason. Somalis are the same, everyone is the same. I think Jordan Peterson talks about this in-group bias, which is just a natural part of how we are as human beings. We like our own, we prefer our own. Now, if you as a sister or a brother do not feel like you belong to that group for whatever reason, right? You grew up maybe in an area where you were the only one. For example, Asian or black kids who grow up in white neighborhoods will typically marry white if they can, because that's where they feel comfortable, right? They don't feel Asian, black, or whatever. They feel like they understand white culture more. So they will probably marry a white woman or white man. My point is, the fact that people want to preserve their culture or their language or their family tradition, I'm not happy with Muslims stigmatizing that, because that's just a normal part of being human, right? And the fact that Nigerians, for example, by and large, they marry Nigerians. They won't even marry Ghanaians. They will marry a Nigerian, and if they're Yoruba, they prefer a Yoruba, and that's how they roll. But nobody says that they're racist. That's just their preference. So even as Muslims, let's not get tied into or pulled into those culture wars where every preference is some kind of discrimination, some kind of toxic something, some racism or ism.
How much you know Southeast Asian.
Oh, I know them. I know them well.
Okay. So,
but sorry, can I just say about Aliyah? I think, sorry, my apologies. This generation, it has Gen X parents. So Gen X, that's more or less us. Our children are now growing up, right? The Gen Zs, they're the ones who, in a few years' time, they'll be getting married. Even our cultural expression is watered down, right? Anybody who has parents who are like 40, in their 40s, your parents are nowhere near as cultural as your grandparents, am I right? You probably didn't even grow up speaking your language. So the fact is that Gen Z, when they come up, they are going to be easy with everyone. And it's going to be based on who they feel comfortable with, who they like, you know, dean-wise, who they gel with. And the Gen X parents are not going to have a problem with that.
Yeah.
So I believe that.
That's how one would think. But isn't something different being said there in the question? That's what kind of threw me.
But this is, so sis, if you want to speak to this, from what you've seen, the reason that people are preferring to go with their own, is it because now, are they in their like 30s and 40s? Because that's millennials and they still have to deal with the boomer parents. But I'm thinking the next generation, because of multiculturalism, because most of us grew up in the UK and don't speak our languages anyway, and most of us are not that cultural, it's a sad thing, but it's life. We are going to be a lot more open to marrying all sorts of people because the cultural aspect isn't there. But what are you seeing, sis?
I'm saying it's an added barrier, probably a necessary barrier. Sorry. I'm saying it's an unnecessary barrier because we're talking about so many single people having problems finding a partner, and these may be suitable partners whereby perhaps, you know, as you say, we go back to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we put the deen first. Is the person of good character? Is there deen in place? All the things really that, the ingredients that should make a marriage work. Alhamdulillah, I did end up finding, you know, I got married recently outside of marriage events, alhamdulillah. But I'm just saying, as an experience, it can deter people from going to these means, which really is a good facilitation to meet people. But unfortunately, because of the mentality, whether that's because of the home, and that's a lot of work that needs to be done in the home then, because there's a problem there, because it's filtering into society. So that's where the issue is. There's no problem if it's a preference, but if it's a deliberate, whereby you find maybe a person from a different culture is better than the person of preference, then actually it's a deliberate singling out that person because of their race and background. You get people openly saying that they don't want their children to marry black people, for example, amongst Muslims.
Sister, I get you. I think one of the things that maybe we should maybe articulate it as is colorism. So even within cultures, there is a preference for lighter skinned people, and that is the problem. That is the problem. So I have had again conversations with people who I think, you know, and they'll say that they got rejected, and the feedback they had was someone said that they were too dark. You know, this is the kind of issue.
And this can't just be blamed on parents back home. It's our generation.
It's our generation.
30, 40 something people who claim to be open-minded, and yet they are colorist.
Yes.
And we've seen that directly.
Yeah. Professional, educated, yet they are going
So
back to
how do you know? How do you know when someone's colour is and when someone just has a cultural preference?
Oh, they don't.
They don't mention these words.
They actually say, look, you know,
Yeah, Allah. Subhanallah. Some people are brave or foolish.
Okay, sorry, there's a brother.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions now, but I'll start with.
Just to be succinct, please, inshallah.
I'll try to be. First, first I wanted to start. We started back on polygamy, and I just wanted to give an example, a succinct example, because my father, you know, when he was alive, he has two wives, my mom's. And I wanted to point out that one of the first things he said to me when I was younger and I was starting to, because I lived in Jamaica, there's nobody with two wives. First things he said to me was, if it is that you even ponder it, you know, as a man, that you want to have two wives, the first thing is that he said that Allah said you must be able to treat them equally. If you cannot treat them equally, stay away from it. That is one of the criteria he was saying. You must be able to treat your wives equally. And I also want to give an example based on my mom. So my dad had 4 wives, not all at the same time. His first wife, he divorced her because she was more in the dunya. The second wife didn't work out, but his third wife, which is my mom, they were only married for maybe 5 years before my dad got married to my second mom. But what I want to point out is the process, how that happened. It wasn't that my dad suddenly one day got up and said, yeah, I'm gonna have a second wife, and boom, that's it. You don't have a choice. You don't have a say in anything, you know, because the family it's a structure, it's a relationship. You must talk to your wife. You must, you know, get her. How would you feel if I had, you know, is your wife gonna feel demoralized? Obviously, yes, you must go back to Deen. What does Allah say? But what I'm saying is, when my second mom wanted to get married to my dad, the first thing she did was not speak to my dad. First thing she did was speak to my mom. How would you feel about this? Huh? Because there was nothing. My dad, alhamdulillah, he was an avid Muslim. He was very deep in his taqwa. And that's why my second mom wanted to marry him, right? But yeah, she asked first, how would you feel? Are you okay with this? And then it was based on what my mom has told me, she was a bit, you know, at first wavy about it. But then she thought back to, like you said, Islam. What does Allah say about it? Is it permissible? And because it's permissible and there's nothing wrong with it and it was halal, she was like, okay, let's try it. You know, let's try it together. And alhamdulillah, it worked out. And now that my father has passed, a couple of years ago, I see that also this is a thing that you have to take into account. If your husband does pass early, you get lonely. And my mother finds comfort in her sister. Right? And I think that's a very important thing that you have to remember, you know. People are going to die. Death is a very real thing, and it comes unexpectedly. And it's very important. That's one thing I wanted to say about polygamy. My question was completely different. So I grew up in Jamaica. In Jamaica, there are not many Muslims, and the majority of the Muslims, when you go to the masjid, are men. And I wanted to come back to the point about the people of the book, because it says in the Quran, the Asabil and Ansar, and one more. I don't remember what the third one is. In Jamaica, I see that a lot of brothers take that and they end up marrying Christians, and it doesn't work out because, as we know, most Christians believe Jesus is God. They have a completely different way of life. I mean, Islam is a way of life, right? And I wanted to ask, you know, because I've also had the experience growing up in Jamaica where you don't see any Muslim woman. You're like, you know, who among the non-Muslims can I, you know, get married to?
Are you asking, is it viable?
Is it viable? And also I've heard that the Ansar mentioned in the Quran is different from Christians today. Is that true in terms of, one who is committing shirk by worshipping Muslim or Prophet, and one who is a follower of Prophet Isa alayhi salam. That's my main question.
We do the easy bit first, and I'll leave the difficult one for you. So the easy one is that permission in the Quran to marry people of the book. It's talking about just people of the book with the permission in the Quran for Muslim men. Permission in the Quran for Muslim men to marry people of the book. It's just people of the book according to their criteria of what makes them a Christian or a Jew. It's not according to our criteria that a true follower of Jesus would commit no shirk and wouldn't believe he's the Son of God. It's according to their criteria. If they believe in the values that make them Christians or part of Christendom, then they're people of the book. Same thing with Jews, okay? So, as an example, if present-day Judaism doesn't consider liberal Jews to be Jews, then they're not people of the book as far as we're concerned. But if they are, then they are. So it means just Christians, whether a Catholic Christian or a Protestant Christian or whatever Christian, that is the people of the book. That is the permission. Whether that is recommended, whether that is wise, whether we should follow Umar and Ibn Umar's view that give that a miss and prefer Muslim women, that's a different situation, which I don't really want to answer for the sole reason that I'm hoping that people are arranging me to go to St. Lucia. Most of my friends that were brought up in this area,
So you I think there is a lot of background noise. There are some sisters or brothers talking by themselves, so we can hear you properly. So if I may request from the brothers and sisters, please be quiet a little bit, please, so we can hear the answer.
So when I was growing up in this area in the 70s, this specific area, it was an area filled with young black men second generation trying to find their identity. Many of them gravitated towards Rasta. Every single person in this area, if you ask them where they were from, it was from Kingston, Jamaica, right? Or the parish of St. Anne, because of Bob Marley, right? Even though they were, otherwise Kingston would have been ruined, chopped the block. But they identified. I know that there are lots of difficult problems in the Caribbean with the various Muslim communities. I'm hoping to go to St. Lucia soon. I would suggest to you that there are a few scholars there, or there are a few scholars there or in the West who have been there a lot, and they are good scholars. Maybe you should speak to them of what's the best thing to do. But let me just say, mashallah, rahmatullah alayhi to your father, may Allah have mercy upon him and raise him to the highest Jannah. Because, subhanallah, he really did right by you in terms of advice.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was a very mature approach to polygamy, and that's what's lacking nowadays. People sort of do it, because they often have problems in their marriage, and they go and seek solutions by marrying someone else rather than actually approaching it in a mature way, which is the way Prophet ﷺ did it. Sister Naomi, did you want to add anything? There's one final question from the sister at the back, and then we'll wrap up.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say thank you very much for the speeches today. Excellent comments, and we'll take them on board, and the wisdom has been received. I just wanted to make a point about polygamy, which is that if we know we can have men can have up to 4 wives, but within a legal context, only one of them can be a legal wife. Only one of them can register as a legal wife in this country. So does that not then set up the second wife potentially for problems in the future with regards to her economic status? Because only one of them will be able to claim certain legal rights. I just wondered how you panelists think that sits in the context of the legal framework of this country.
So in the summer just gone, I was involved in trying to sort out a dispute whereby the husband died. The first wife didn't realise he had another wife. The other wife came and said, I think I get a share of the inheritance, like it's a 1/8 or 1/6. And the first wife was saying, who are you? I mean, and she had other words. And it was a huge mess. It was a huge mess. The first wife felt impelled to go to the law courts to claim her entitlements, which excluded the second wife. The second wife is going to a Sharia council, poor lady, just to try to get something. In the end, it was a mess, and one party came out more aggrieved than the other. They were both aggrieved in one way or the other, so, all I'm saying, it is a reality, what you're saying.
Okay, so obviously this is a fiqh and a legal issue, and you're right, under the law, there is only one recognized wife. What I would say is that for any man, as your father said, any man who intends to have multiple families, do things properly. Do things properly, have the cojones to have the conversation. And I know that many wives are not open to the conversation, but if you're going to be man enough, sorry to use the phrase, Brother Nasir gets triggered when I say this, but if you are...
Even go there.
It's okay.
Because you guys are not going to say if a woman is woman enough.
No, I do say that, so I can say man enough as well, alhamdulillah. But if you are going to step into your man's masculinity enough to take on two women, then you need to have that conversation with your wife and let her know your intentions. That gives her respect. It also means that the subsequent wife has the honor of being recognized as your wife, even if it's just amongst your wife and you. And also, you need to have a will. You need to have a will in place, because I think a will would have dealt with this situation.
Absolutely.
So no, none of us should be sleeping 3 days without an Islamic will. And especially if you are a person who has responsibilities, you have to make sure that those are taken care of. So as for other things, sis, I can't speak to that. The reality is that whether it makes sense on a legal framework or even a spiritual framework sometimes, people are making decisions based on what they feel is best for them. Everyone's doing that, and they're trying to stay within the boundary of the Sharia. Is it going to be ideal? A lot of the time not. Is it something that could be improved? I would argue yes. But where that starts is for the man to make just a deal with himself to say, I'm going to have the conversation when I need to have the conversation. And for a wife to make sure that the door is open for the conversation. Meaning, don't threaten your husband and say, don't you ever do that, because if you ever do that, I'm out of here with the kids. That is the kind of language that we hear sisters using, and it's not right, sisters. It's unfair, and it sets you up and him up. Because now you are holding sword of Damocles over your husband, threatening him with you leaving with the children. Two things. Either he's going to say, all right, then I won't tell you, and you'll go do it anyway. Or he puts you in a position where he says, well, I want to do it, and now you are in a situation where you have to decide, okay, am I going to do what I said I was going to do, and I'm going to leave and take the children away from their father and disappear for 6 weeks, or am I going to sit this out? So those types of trying to have leverage over, to force your husband to do things the way you want them done, is not wise, and it's not Islamic. Again, at the end of the day, sisters and brothers, the outcome is with Allah. You can't force your husband to be faithful to you. That is an outcome from Allah. You can't force your wife to be faithful to you. That's with Allah. You can't force your husband never to marry again. That is the outcome that Allah decides. How many men know of brothers who've been talking about polygamy for years? I'm going to marry again, bro. I'm going to get another wife. Yeah. They're giving it all the big talk. 5 years later, they didn't manage to secure anything. Yes? We know this. If it's not in your qadr, it's not written for you. And then there's women who are begging their husbands to marry again. We have them on the YouTube comments. I've been asking my husband for 10 years to take another wife. He refuses. Or he tries, but nothing works out. It's the qadr. It's what's written for you at the end of the day.
Thank you. I also want to make the point that I think brothers have to be honest with themselves and know that if they can't do justice, and we're told that they probably can't, sorry brothers, then don't do it. And the brother made the point really well about that.
Now, see, this is the problem. We let that type of comment slide, and it's a slick comment. The reality is, if he's not marrying someone who's underage, sister, you're a grown woman. So you should do the vetting to know if he can handle it or not, and then choose to not get into it. We have to make sure we don't pedestalize Muslim women and hold them accountable just like we hold men accountable. Because if not, you're going to continue to create this dynamic where there's friction between brothers and sisters, and brothers are choosing to go abroad. Brothers are choosing to marry women of the book. So if we want to repeat the same thing of the past, we can. But now this is the uncomfortable part that people don't want to hear. But that does disservice to sisters, especially those that are 28 and older. Uncomfortable reality, but it's the truth. Hold sisters accountable just like we hold brothers accountable. Because if not, you're just going to continue to create this ease between the brothers and sisters, and brothers are wising up to it. You see it in the comments, you see it how they're speaking out, and they're getting their passports and they're going abroad. Sisters, you can say it doesn't matter, but they got leverage. They can marry from back home. They can go to another Muslim country and marry. You can't.
Just to jump in on that, sorry, related to this, because this is the kind of thing we had in the candid conversation. The unfortunate reality is that there are sisters who will accept a man in marriage who cannot provide, if she thinks that he brings enough value. Now, that sister, obviously, she has her own, maybe she has her own home. This is a reality, right? There's sisters here who have their own home, maybe it's from the government or whatever, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong. I'm just saying this is the reality. There are sisters who will accept half a husband, a third of a husband, a quarter of a husband, rather than be on their own. There are sisters who will accept £50 a week because they're already taking care of everything. There are sisters who will accept one conjugal visit a month because that's how desperate they are. And I don't mean desperate in a bad way. I just mean on the reality. How does that dynamic impact a man's decisions? Can you see how it sets up an imbalance? Because as a wife, you have all the cards, right? You have the husband, you have the marriage, you have the home, you have the children, and you have his loyalty, right? You want to preserve that, I understand. You're saying that if he's going to step out, or if he's going to increase his responsibilities, he has to be able to do it equally. That's what your father said. But then you're putting a requirement on him that he must now take another woman and provide for her as he provides for you. And that's your requirement on him. But what if he meets a sister who says, I don't need that? I don't need all of that. I'm happy to have you on these terms. Yeah. What are we saying in that situation?
So let's, I think maybe what you're saying is all correct, but I feel like you're starting somewhere in the middle. If we start from just the top, okay, the top is plural marriages, a Muslim man marrying another wife. The basic condition is he has to do financial justice. The thing of justice is not in love or in emotions, it's just in financial justice, okay? And the hadith about the sides ripped open on the day of judgment for a man who has more than one wife not being able to do financial justice, it's a problem, which is why most of the classical jurists say it's permissible to take a second wife, it's not encouraged, merely because by the time of the 6th Islamic century, say in the time of Imam Nawawi, 1 century before Ibn Taymiyyah, to have 2 wives in cosmopolitan Syria, in cosmopolitan Yemen, whatever, was quite difficult. It wasn't like the days of the early Salaf where it might have been easier. So the fiqh books tell us it's permissible. That's how it is in the Hanbali fiqh as well, it's permissible. But Sister Naim was pointing out, and I suspect it's one of the points that Nasir is trying to make, that look, there are variables. There are variables. The rule is justice financially. But there will be many times, and I assume Sister Naima knows people, because I know people exactly as you described, and they're very happy in their relationship. The sister has her own flat, she's financially well-to-do, she doesn't need a penny for the husband, but the husband just out trying to be a good man, he gives whatever anyway, doing right by his first wife, and it's one of the success stories. In fact, it's more of a success story than some of the monogamous marriages that I know. You know, there's nur in both of those marriages. And so we're not able to generalize. All we would say is what the father said to the son. That if you're going to do it, start with the principle that you need to do financial justice. Now, if the woman that you're going to marry says, no problem, waivers her right, that's fine. She's wavered her right. You're not allowed to waive her rights, nor go in with the attitude that I'm not going to fulfill rights. Then that's perfectly fine. And Bismillah, good upon people who can do that in the right way, in the respectful way, and bring nur into the whole relationships, inshallah ta'ala.
Sorry, just to add on your point about my dad. I want to point out that my mom, she's a housewife. My second mom, she's a judge. She works, she's good. So it's not like they have to be treated perfectly the same in like every single thing, but treat them equally in accordance to what they need and do right by their rights, their Islamic rights. You know, they have a right upon you and you have a right upon them. And you must know those rights and she must know those rights.
Because being a husband is more than paying bills. Being a husband and a leader and a protector is more than just paying bills.
Yes, Jazakallah, sister, you're right, I agree with all of you. However, what Brother Nasir said about the leverage, that the men, when they have, because they are able to do it, they can do it whenever they want, or can go back home and get married again. And I think it goes back again to the aspect of fear. That's why women are scared of making so many sacrifices for a man and staying home, and then when she reaches 45, when she's not able to have no children, he can just marry someone else. And you know, that's why women are looking for financial freedom, so that when that happens, at least she can feel like, at least I have something for myself. That's the only point I wanted to make.
Jazakumullah khairan to everyone. I think we're going to have to, I'm really sorry, but we really are going to have to cut things short. We've gone over by 2 hours, so please sign up for the workshop tomorrow. I'd like to thank all the speakers, Sister Naima, Sister Fauzia, Brother Nasir, Brother Aliyah, for a really fantastic discussion, for enriching this really important subject. Thank you all for participating in the discussion and for bringing it to life, and inshallah we'll continue the discussion. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Jazakallah khairan. Can one masjid, to attending our masjid.